instead of having the day being a problem to us because we have already made all the necessary arrangement, we can accommodate the virtual platform, but that was creating another problem for us because we even have our own members that decided to take advantage of that situation. And it's worse on the issue of alternate members. I can't explain it more than we have done. And it's not only it's not about losing momentum. I can tell you now that as we'll be going to KZN in the coming days, you'll have a problem because you'll have an alternate and a permanent member, all of them available to get to KZN on the ground. And you ask yourself, why are we picking, choosing? What's so interesting? And yeah, but it is what it is. Nola, are we winning? Honorable Minister, are you winning with another device?
Yeah. Chair, if I also may close the gap of this virtual oversight. It's the first of its kind, but it's fine. Also, another thing that maybe we need to make an observation of is this issue of presentation by these same departments. In the first round, Chair, we had documentation well in advance where we were able to engage ourselves with that. It has not happened now, and I think we need to raise it with the co-chairs. I think the reports that we have, I might be wrong, DPE came maybe yesterday, if I'm correct. Transport came last night. We couldn't access it. The one we are waiting for the Honorable Minister, we don't have it. So I think let us register that concern also, co-chairs. That I don't think it's right, on top of the virtual oversight. Thanks, Chair.
Is there still a gap?
Co-chairs, I'm not sure. I just had my name being called. It's Minister Zulu speaking. I was struggling with connectivity, so I'm not sure I had my name being called.
Honorable Minister Zulu, the ad hoc committee, as per the invitation dealing with flood, disaster relief and recovery, has called your name and the DG to take us through the presentation as we have been to these 3 affected provinces on the ground physically. We got a sense and what your department has done. But we are part of those departments that we identified and the role that we are playing so that you can share with us what you have done from the day of the disaster to date. So we've called you. The platform is yours, Honorable Minister.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairperson. My sincere apology because I have a terrible network problem, so I'm using the phone now because I was trying to use both, either the laptop or the iPad, and they're both not connecting. So we try not to use the phone because it uses data and it charges a lot of money. However, I am on the phone now, and I had a meeting this morning with my department. We have been preparing for the presentation that has to be made here. So I see that they're saying I must be on the video. My problem is that I'm using the phone. I'd rather not be on the video because the network is very bad. Can I be allowed to switch off the video, please?
Already it's off, Honorable Minister, but it is what it is. We can't change the situation. Let's allow you to take us through the presentation, Honorable Minister. You are allowed.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. The department is here, and it so happens that fortunately one was in KZN over the past 2 days, including visiting. We were gone there for the celebration of the August 9th Women's Day, but we took the opportunity to also visit some of the shelters because we feel we are worried about quite a number of other issues that are related to people moving moving out of the shelters. But the department has got a program, a report that it is going to present to you here. So firstly, I must apologize, Chairperson, that the network is not so very good, but I hope the department will be able to connect properly. So, Chairperson, both co-chairs, co-chairpersons, both Honorable Frolic and Honorable Sinyambi, and members of parliament who are present here, a very good morning to you all, and we thank you for this opportunity to update the committee on our ongoing reconstruction and recovery efforts in the provinces that were affected by the floods. As you know, KwaZulu-Natal was the worst affected, and one has spent more time in KwaZulu-Natal than the other provinces because of the impact of the disaster in KwaZulu-Natal. And in April and May this year, some parts, as we know, experienced a disaster, including KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and Northern Cape. And of course, we indicate the fact that tragically lives were lost, thousands of homes were damaged, were destroyed, and significant local infrastructure was damaged, and scores of our people were displaced. As you are aware, some people are still living in unaccepted, some are unaccounted for, which is the biggest pain for our people. But we want to indicate also that as a result, President Cyril Ramaphosa declared the national state of disaster on the 18th of April this year, and the social development portfolio is working together with provincial governments, donors and development agencies and local organizations to ensure a coordinated, timely and effective recovery in the immediate term into the immediate term, into the long term. I think when the department is making the presentation, Chairperson, it would also indicate the fact that we feel we need to prepare ourselves better for disasters, considering the fact that the disasters are here to stay and considering climate change and all that. But one of my biggest pain in the experience of visiting some of these places is that the disasters are already finding us in a very difficult situation from an infrastructure development point of view, because the communities that were affected, when you go to KZN yourselves, honorable members, you will see how people have built their homes, where they have built their homes, and as to whether there was even planning, even to where they are supposed to build. These are just some of the things that we need to deal with in the long term, because fixing this thing of impact of disaster is not a one-sided thing. It is something that needs to be done by the government, by the private sector, by civil society, by everyone. But it is also an issue for me, practically speaking, using the experience of this time to also assist our communities to understand and appreciate the future challenges that we will have if we don't focus on educating each other and making everyone aware of the challenges, and learning also, by the way, from other countries, in particular, countries that have real disasters, which fortunately for us, and thank God that we have not had to go through those kind of disasters that we see in other countries. And it's one of the things I've asked my department to say, department, let's look at a coordinated effort. Let's look at national, provincial, and local government coordinated efforts. Let's plan for the future rather than be reactive. A recovery in the social environment encompasses the provision of food and nutrition, case management, psychosocial support, and referral services to ensure the well-being, health, and welfare of members of the community individually and collectively. And I must indicate, Chairperson, that again the pain is when you find men, women, and children in one hall, and you find that children are there, they don't even have things that can keep them alive, keep them playing. They don't have no toys, they have absolutely nothing. And I believe that it is possible for us to provide holistic provision of things that can be done. And again, I'm saying these are lessons that we learn, and we just need to be innovative, creative, and work in speed. This is what I am demanding from the Department of Social Development. I had the opportunity to visit communities in Port St. John's in the Eastern Cape and some parts of KwaZulu-Natal that were affected by the floods, as I indicated earlier on. The social service professionals have been at the forefront in supporting the affected communities in the provisions of humanitarian relief and continue to do so in the recovery phase. One of the things that I want to raise also here, Chair, is that at the beginning of the floods or any other disaster, we have a whole lot of other people running and coming to the place and giving whatever they can give in the short term. But after a while, they all leave, and it is us, the government, at all three spheres of government, that are left in these communities, are left with these communities. And again, we continue as a Department of Social Development to plead with others who are working with us not to leave us alone in these places. We must have the long-term commitment and long-term participation of the NPOs, the NGOs, the private sector, and so forth. The scale of the flooding events are extreme and thereby overwhelming, and any sense of our worst-case scenario floods preparedness. This is a clear demonstration of the extremes becoming more and more normal under the climate change crisis. Looked at through the lens of time, clearly our society has entered an unprecedented and devastating period. As part of the global pattern, our experience is part of the changing climate system that is already wreaking havoc upon vulnerable communities and environments all over. While the focus is now on reconstruction and recovery efforts, my concern is that some of the flood-affected individuals and families, in particular in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, still need a lot of assistance. As of 8th of August, 61 shelters were still operational. This means that the flood-impacted individuals and families continue to live in temporary shelters 4 months after the fact. This reality has depleted the resources of the provincial social development departments that were set aside for disaster relief. Housing and food remain of the utmost priority for these who are still accommodated in temporary shelters, particularly in eThekwini. People feel that their lives and that of their families are in limbo, and I can tell you this is what I saw as I went there, but I'm not one to moan and groan. I'm one to say, what do we do with all this in the quickest way that we can, including the Department of Social Development is always the first on the scene when such things happen. And therefore, we are also pressurizing and pushing other departments, as the DG will show, particularly human settlement, to really come to play with us here and be in the forefront of assisting. We therefore need to work with much greater urgency to secure temporary resettlement, preferably permanent resettlement, as news defocus away from the floods we are experiencing donor fatigue, as I indicated earlier on. While all of us accept that the future floods are inevitable, evidence to this inquiry has shown that floods are also manageable, and we can and should prepare for them better. The committee expects this report and its recommendations will prove valuable to improving the NSW government's preparedness, coordination, and response to future natural disasters, including future flooding events. We ought to recognize that in order to protect our people, our natural resources, and our economy from the impact of these extreme climate events, we need to, ahead of time, increase our investments in defense and preparation against disasters. This will lead to demonstrable benefits in reduced damage and quick recovery. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Those will be my opening remarks, and I will ask the department through the DG to make their presentation, but also indicate, Chairperson, that when we were discussing about our presentation, we were also conscious of the fact that monitoring and evaluation has also done its on-the-ground monitoring and evaluation, and they have also asked us to submit to them what we have done in the department. So as the department is making its presentation, it is also possible that there can be a repetition from their side, but we believe they are monitoring and evaluating. They don't necessarily take what we give them. They go on the ground, and what they find should be something which is focused on by this ad hoc committee. Thank you so much, co-chairs.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Zulu. DG, whilst we are getting on the platform to take us through, we can confirm, Honorable Minister, that we have been on the ground and we saw those shelters, and we are quite correct. 4 months after the disaster has been declared, the situation is still dire. But DG, take us through.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairpersons. Good morning. I hope I am visible. I know there's a bit of background light which is not very good, but I will try and keep my screen on. And thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for the interventions. Chairperson, I'm going to share the presentation on the screen, and I would just like guidance whether it's visible or not.
Lindsay, I'm not sure, sorry, Chairperson, I'm not sure whether it's in Linton's office that there's someone else is speaking. Can you ask everyone to mute, please?
I suspect it's on the side of the DG. DG, make sure that your place that you are in, it's more secured, or any other member that might not have muted, please mute so that we don't disturb the presentation from the DG.
Thank you, and my sincere apologies, Chair. I wonder if the presentation is visible now, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members.
Not yet, but it's getting there.
Okay. But now, Honorable Chair?
It's visible, I can see it, I'm not sure, I think it's visible, Linton. Sorry, Chair,
Okay.
I should be going through you, but it's visible.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. So let me start, and thank you for the opportunity to present to this very important committee. Let me also just highlight our appreciation for actually being first to present this morning, and then other government departments, because I think the essence of this presentation really talks to the state of the people from the lens of a social development perspective, at least. So we don't really look at other interventions or other aspects, but we really focus on our interventions that we've done in line with our mandates as the DSD portfolio, and we call ourselves a portfolio. I think the Minister may have indicated, because of the agencies that belong to the department, which include the SASA and of course the National Development Agency. So this presentation really focuses on the state of the people and the heart of what people are going through, what's happening on the ground in terms of our analysis, our assessments, and how we have then intervened post that. So we'll talk about the role of the DSD. We'll talk about, this actually should have been a presentation outline. We'll talk about our role within coordinating structures. We'll talk about the various support mechanisms that we provide in terms of our specific interventions. I will talk a little bit about a real-time monitoring tool, and I must apologize in advance, Chair. There's a slide or two that I may not have included in the presentation that was sent to you, but I will quickly talk to that. And then we talk about our services, particularly at shelters, including food provision, etc. And then we talk about some of our interventions through our agencies, which is SASA in the main. We talk about the challenges that we found on the ground and talk to some interventions that we think are quite crucial and important for the furtherance of our work, but also to ensure that there's a heightened level of coordination, not just from government, but from other sectors of society as well, to ensure that we prepare adequately. We'll talk about 6 of those at a high level. So just very quickly, Honorable Chair, we've got only 13 slides, and we're already on slide number 3. I hope this is visible. The role of the DSD, I think our mandate is quite clear, and core to it is to ensure protection of vulnerability by providing a comprehensive social development service to promote the well-being of all people. So it's vulnerable people primarily, but of course other people that are not necessarily classified as vulnerable, we also extend our support to them. And this responsibility is for the entire portfolio, as indicated, including our agencies, and really is to ensure that we uphold the rights of care, dignity, food, and social services of affected individuals, and to ensure that these rights are protected and upheld and promoted. Of course, this also speaks to Section 28 of the Constitution, which really talks largely to some of these rights, particularly as they affect children. And then, of course, the protection of all individuals, whether displaced or not, I already indicated, especially vulnerable groups. And vulnerable groups include women, they include children, older persons, and of course, persons with disability. And this is central to our mandates. The assessments. We will do assessments and profiling through the psychosocial support mechanisms that we render, and we'll talk a little bit about that at a later stage, of affected households in order to determine the immediate needs of the communities. And then it gives us a sense of what should be our short-term, medium-term, and long-term interventions in those communities. And then within the context of this disaster, we just want to highlight that we've provided psychosocial support services to affected families through case management, debriefing with individuals and families, in some cases even families that are not necessarily in the various provinces that we speak to, those that may be outside, because we must engage with them as well. Community members, so we look at the spectrum of community members. We look at so we look at immediate social relief, which is in the form of grants in the main. We have what we call a social relief of distress. And yes, everybody knows about the social relief of distress 350 grant, but we also have social relief of distress that we dispense through SASA and through our provincial departments of social development, which essentially is cash and vouchers, in some cases food vouchers, in some cases cash vouchers, that we provide to people to be able to buy essentials such as toiletries, such as food in some instances, and so on and so forth. We've been providing also dignity packs to people. We've been providing hot meals and what you call non-perishable foods and other essentials like vanity packs, as I indicated. But also we provided social facilitation, and this is referrals, it's assessments of people in critical services, and referring rather to areas and other departments like Home Affairs. When people have lost IDs, we're able to refer them to Home Affairs, we're able to refer them to a number of other institutions. And then, of course, I'll talk a little bit about this later, also support in terms of burial support, not core burial support, as it were. So, for example, corpus funerals and other support in terms of the actual entire funerals are provided for by COCTA. What we do is we provide funding, money to families to assist them with buying food for the funeral and other important essentials that may be required. So I already spoke to the psychosocial support, and I must say a lot of our debriefing has happened both, as I indicated, with people in shelters and outside of shelters. And what we are finding is that a lot of people have actually been hit by what we call a triple disaster. Because some of these people, some of the people that we've been engaging with and doing assessments with, are people that have suffered from COVID-19, and of course the impact of that has been really hard, particularly in terms of extended families and older people in the main. But these are, in most cases, are the same people that have also suffered through a loss of jobs, through the uprisings that took place in KZN in particular, but also then a third, of course, impact, which has been the floods and the impacts of climate change as well. And so really a lot of people are suffering through triple challenges, as it were. Sorry, Chair?
If you can have it on a full screen, instead of having both the one you're presenting and the following slide, it can show better.
Okay. I used to remember how it was done. Let me see. I can't. I did it before. I just can't remember now. High presenter view. I think that's it. There we go. That's it. Is that better, Chair?
Yes, it's better now. Thank you.
It seems I remembered my technique Yes, thank you very much. So as I was saying, we really talked to the issue of, I think I spoke to psychosocial support and the triple challenges, as it were, that people are facing. So we also looked at shelters, and I'm going to a little bit of detail on this when I get to the shelters, and some of our concerns as it relates to shelters. And then I will talk a little bit about, so essentially a little bit about that. And then I think, sorry, I just need to move the screen, which is in the way. So as I indicated, our coordination, our interventions have largely been social relief, but we've also looked at donor support, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to the next slide, to affected families and communities through our entire portfolio and the coordination that we've managed even in that context. I must say, Honourable Chair, that this presentation will be largely focused on the interventions that we've provided to KZN and less to the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape, and I'll explain why. In the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape, the height of the floods, we were able to provide some support. Please, Isaac. We were able to provide support, particularly psychosocial support. There were a number of shelters established in the provinces, but those shelters were immediately closed because the very few people were in the shelters, and people felt that they were better off with family members, particularly in the Eastern Cape. So we've whilst, our support in terms of social relief of distress has been provided, particularly in the Eastern Cape and Northern Cape, in the form of food vouchers, and I think we spent just over 500,000 rand providing blankets, providing blankets and providing I think it was vanity packs and vouchers. I think just almost 700,000 rand just in the Eastern Cape alone. And this is not counting the Social Development Department. I'm just talking more to SASSA. And in the Northern Cape, slightly lesser than that. Really, the bulk of our interventions have been in KZN. If I move to the next slide, Chair, we are really just highlighting here the core structures that we are part of. Of course, you know that there's an intergovernmental committee on disasters, which is led by the Minister of COCTA, and our ministers are part of that. Our ministers part of that interministerial committee that then feeds into cabinet. A little lower down, you have the National Disaster Management Advisory Forum, and where we really play a more of an active role is in the National Joint Flood Committee, Coordination Committee, where we lead a committee called, a subcommittee rather, called Humanitarian Relief, and really we focus on the coordination aspects with key departments and our interventions, and report rather on our interventions that we provided. We do have a role to play in some of the other committees. COCTA speaks best to this slide in terms of food and nutrition and security, for example, in terms of I think the security and emergency search and rescue, and of course working with DPME, as the Minister indicated, we feed our interventions and our work into DPME, and you'll see their presentation really covers nicely a number of aspects that we have also done, including other government departments. I'm going to move to the next slide. So on psychosocial support, I think I've spoken a little bit to this, but we really have provided trauma debriefing counseling services, including bereavement counseling and burial support, supervision and coaching for social service practitioners on provision of appropriate services to shelters. And the reason we do this is because we've had to move social workers from other areas into the affected areas, particularly in KZN, and moving them from different districts into eThekwini, for example, Uhu, and Msunguzi, and I think Kotubuza as well, which were the really key areas that were affected. So we've had to do debriefing sessions with them. In some cases, we've had to, we even got ready to talk to other provinces to deploy social workers to assist in KZN because of the need that was escalating. And as I indicated, a lot of the suffering was really around so it was building up as a combination of things, including the floods, which made it quite difficult for families. When we did some discussions with families and children in the main, we found that a lot of children some children have actually not gone back to school. Some children have not had a uniform to go back to school, and we provided support within that context, and I'll speak a bit about that as well. So we deployed additional social service practitioners. So this is inclusive of auxiliary social workers, it's inclusive of social workers themselves, it's inclusive of, I think, community development practitioners as well, and child and youth care workers. We've deployed a range of social service practitioners into these affected areas. And of course, we've started moving some of them out of the areas because in some areas there's been some assistance. We've gotten some children back into school, etc. And of course, interviewing, assessing, and facilitating referrals to other government departments. I've already spoken to this and gave an example of Home Affairs. I think the core aspect, and I'll talk a little bit when I get to the real-time monitoring tool that we did, is the care and protection services and the temporary safe care of neglected children and the response to child abuse cases and rape. We did learn about a number of cases where children were displaced from their families, and we tried to help them and reunite them with families, including some people, mothers, from children and other family members. And in some cases, some children did suffer some negative consequences, unfortunate circumstances of rape and other related matters. And in some cases, we're certainly able to quickly deal with those instances of working with SAPs and other law enforcement agencies. I think in terms of the care and support for people with disabilities in Etegwini, we had one of our centers which housed people with disabilities, and that was heavily affected by the floods and older persons. We were able to move those into temporary residential areas or residents whilst we do a mop-up operation in those facilities where they normally belong. And I think some of them have now moved back into in those areas. And in some areas where our offices were affected, we did manage to find additional accommodation and space to assist those communities where offices were affected. So we tried by all means to make sure that in some cases we were also able to deploy mobile services. For example, we have trucks, SASA trucks that are able to assist. We're able to move even some people from other offices that are not necessarily as busy and move them to other affected areas so that we're able to assist. I must say that our staff have really done a fantastic job, especially our social workers on the ground in dealing with the traumatic cases that people have faced. And I think that we must really continue to extend our appreciation to them for the hard work that they do. I think I've spoken about older persons and just linking individuals to chronic illnesses, to healthcare, with chronic illnesses to healthcare facilities. In some instances, we worked very well with the Department of Health in trying to get medication to people in a swifter manner. And in some cases, we even take the elderly in our vehicles, social development vehicles and SASA vehicles, in some cases, to medical facilities where they're able to get their medication. Chair, this slide really talks to, and this is a slide that's not in your presentation, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm simply going to highlight that this is what we call a real-time monitoring tool, and I think we did this in May, if I'm not mistaken, or just before May. I think it was May and June. And it really talks to the partnership and the study that we did in partnership with UNICEF and UNFPA, which are UN agencies, to better understand the impact of the floods on the conditions of women and children and persons living with disabilities in the main. We wanted to see how this is impacting them. We also wanted to see how it highlights, we wanted to highlight some of the needs assessments that needed to be done, which inform some of our interventions. You will see that from this slide, a lot has been on care. There's a medium risk on care and protection. This is largely because of the kids that have been out of school, the kids that needed psychosocial support in the main, and so on and so forth. The other areas that are of concern to us, of course, are the areas around access to health care, as I indicated earlier, and food security to a large extent. But we have managed to shift this a bit. We're going to go back and redeploy this tool to really get a better sense of now what has happened post our interventions. So this, you would see we applied some level of intelligence working with credible partners to ensure that our interventions on the ground are actually sound. So this is really people that were what do you call, interviewed in our sample. We did a very small sample, and in the next round that we go, we'd like to expand that sample. This really talks to the surveys that we've also done. We spoke to a number of people in and outside of shelters, and really talking to the impacts of the disaster in households and different settings in terms of housing, blocks, apartment blocks, and so on and so forth, informal settlements and so on and so forth, to really get a sense of the impact of the floods, particularly to children and women and persons living with disabilities. Chair, on this slide, and I'm almost close to the tail end, on this slide we really talk about, I've spoken about the shelters that have in a way been decanted, especially in the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape. Because families have been, people have been reintegrated into society and largely into their families. Look, we really highlight these 4 districts because this is where the heart of the impact was, especially at eThekwini. If you look at the analysis from May onwards to around July, you find that there's an estimated, I can't remember the numbers, but it's around 28%, I think it's, of people that have actually left shelters. Now, in some instances, these people have left and moved into temporary TRUs, as it were. In some cases, people have moved out of shelters, but have gone back into shelters. So you'll see a very slow movement of people out of shelters. We estimate that it's around 28 to 30% only of people who have moved out of shelters, less than 2,500, I think it is, that have actually left shelters. Some have moved into TRUs, as I indicated, and some have not. Now, one of the challenges we are finding is that we are struggling to really identify the people who are coming into shelters. And let me explain. In some instances, we realize that it's not necessarily people who have been affected by the floods who are coming into the shelters. In some cases, it's people who are looking for work and don't have a place to stay at night and move into the shelter. Because in the shelters, you find nutritious food. You get support in terms of COVID-19 medical supplies and other related issues. So we are trying to clean up the way in which people move into shelters. In some cases, it's not everybody who is impacted by the disaster, but it's people who come off the streets who are referring others to say, look, there's a place to sleep here, there's a place to stay here, and so on and so forth. But of course, the major challenges have been, at least from the people that you've interacted with, around the pace of the erecting TRUs. I think in some cases, people have complained that it's taking a very long time. In some cases, because of the land makeup, particularly in eThekwini, it's becoming difficult to place people in areas where the soil can withstand at least the setup that is being put up. And in some cases, we're finding that people are also indicating that their concern is that the quality of the structure that is being built and that is being given to them is not really useful. So I think to date, and these are estimated numbers in terms of the data that we receive from the province, around 862 TRUs have been completed and around 720 have been occupied. We do think that the number has expanded slightly, but as I indicated, this is the latest information, I think as of last week or so, 7 to 10 days that we've received. I must just state this case, which is a serious concern for us. And we think that we need to relook at the way in which shelters are actually set up. For example, we're using walls at the moment as shelters, and we think that that's a very high risk because everybody sleeps in the same hall. You get women, men, children, and elderly people all sleeping in the same hall. In some instances, there's not adequate ablution facilities, but I must say that in most cases, we've been able to deploy ablution facilities. We've been able to deploy electricity in some cases where it's dark for people to move around. We've been able to really make it habitable, as it were. But we are concerned about what we think may be an impact and a ripple effect, a negative ripple effect of housing everybody in one hall, which is inclusive of crime, gender-based violence, COVID-19, the spreading, rape, and teenage pregnancies. We're worried about this. We need to think, essentially what we're saying is that we need to probably rethink about the way in which shelters are set up so that we avoid this additional risk of having people falling into this situation. And of course, as I indicated, in some cases, in some of the shelters that I personally visited, for example, I think it was Verulam, and I can't remember, in Potchefstroom, I think it was, I can't recall, but the young people, they were saying, but we don't want to go back to school. We feel it's it's not going to help us in any way. We really try to convince them to say, but you've got to go back. It's important for your future, and so on and so forth. And some of them are saying, well, we've lost our families, we've got nowhere to go, we've got nothing else left for us, and so on and so forth. So it is a really difficult situation for some people, at least at the time when we did the interviews. This slide really talks to the fact that we've managed to close some shelters, particularly if you look at eThekwini, where we had 120 shelters. 40 were closed. Around 44, I think, families were linked to land parcels. Just in eThekwini, if I'm not mistaken. These are house families, and then we have about 80 at present shelters that are still open, and I think we have about 3,809 number of people remaining in the shelters. These are households, and just over 1,000 odd so that have moved out. So, but this essentially talks to the fact that there's a decline or there's a closure of some shelters in some of the districts. I really wanted to just pay a little bit of attention here. So, just in terms of the support that we provided in terms of social relief of distress, and these are vouchers. We give people vouchers. They access them at various stores where they can buy, in some instances, nappies for kids, implements such as pots and pans, and other essentials that they're able to buy for themselves. And through SASSA, we've supported just over 9,500 vouchers that we've given out to families to the tune of 1,980 rands. And I think we've slightly beyond now, just close to 17 million rand that we've used, and we're talking only in KZN here. And we've provided a number of hot meals. We've provided largely blankets, mattresses, and dignity packs for those housed in shelters. And of course, this is, I think, to about just over 8.4 million rand. The number is slightly increased, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, once we provide the support, of course, other donors come in. The provincial and local government continues to provide some of these services as we move along. And then, of course, burial support, as I indicated, we've supported just over 325 families in KZN alone who have suffered fatalities and didn't have money to bury their families. And what we do is we give them 1,980 times 2 towards the burial support, so they're able to bury their families with dignity. And those kids that have been affected, we've spent just over 3.2 million rand buying uniform for just over 1,200 young kids who are now able to go back to school because they have lost shoes, that they lost uniform. And I must say that when we do this, we use small businesses and cooperatives from the districts to be able to support people within those particular districts. Just from a donor coordination point of view, Honorable Chairs, we have provided, we've worked together with DIRCO and COCTA to coordinate donations that come from foreign countries. And these have largely been within the context of food, bedding, clothing, medical supplies, vanity packs, blankets, as I indicated. In some cases, money. For example, the People's Republic of China has been giving and providing support in the form of cash that we've been able to dispense and share with the provinces in that regard. But other embassies, Nepal, Hungary, Eritrea, Qatar, Flanders, government of Flanders, Japan, United Arab Emirates, Canada, Philippines, Eswatini, Turkey, Mozambique, and other UN bodies have also provided a lot of support towards particularly the people living in shelters. We are also aware that there are a number of other donations that have come in, and we facilitated some from corporates and some from civil society that we've channeled to the province, and the province then coordinates at a provincial level because they're closer to where the challenges are. They've been able to then continue the coordination of donations at the provincial level. Let me go to the next slide. So this is the last slide, and essentially, just to wrap up, the first 2 points, number one, we talked about the challenges and the interventions that are required. The issue of uncertainty with the length of stay of people in shelters is a bit of a challenge for us. And the Minister spoke to this in her remarks because it's putting pressure on us in terms of both funding. In other words, we have to provide support to shelters but we don't know exactly when, in some instances, when they're going to actually close and when people are actually going to move out. I know that the city and the province, I think, are working on an end date towards the end of the year to have all shelters closed. For us, it will help working with other government departments to have surety so that we know how to plan in this regard. But beyond that, the funding aspect is also a strain on resources in terms of our social workers, because those that we've deployed from certain areas have to move back to other areas to continue working in other districts where they were originally placed. And so the uncertainty of the stay of people in shelters does become a challenge for us. And of course, we've already started working in a speedily manner to integrate our approaches, including with human settlements. We're just working on actual timelines for closure. The slow TRU delivery, and I think there has been delivery of TRUs. As I indicated, from what we are gathering from the ground, from the people we are talking to, is the concern around the time in which it takes to deploy the TRUs, but also just the integration between local government and provincial and national government. But I know a lot of work has already ensued in this regard, and people are really are hoping that there would be a speedy a move in this regard. The changing faces of shelters, I did indicate that one of the challenges we face is that we end up having a myriad of people coming into shelters and not necessarily for the people in which the shelters were originally set up for. And so we have to find a way of deploying a much more credible and I suppose digital tracking system where we're able to monitor the inflow of people in and out of shelters. I think this is quite an important point. Then just to quickly move to this point. I'm sorry, I'm just moving my cursor around. The shelters, I highlighted the threat that the shelters pose, the ripple effect in terms of teenage pregnancy, the transmission of COVID-19 and other related social ills, including crime and so on and so forth. And I think we started working even on this so that we're able to avoid some of these challenges. But I think the key issue is to ensure that the shelters are humane enough, and we've done this working with the provinces, as I indicated, by deploying a number of other important interventions in the shelters to ensure that the shelters are humane for people to live in. But of course, our concern is of course the increasing risks of other social ills that may flow out of this. But we're also saying, Chair, the rebuilding aspect within the context of socio-economic development and economic well-being and sustainability, this is a risk for us because people are not moving fast enough into jobs. People are not moving fast enough into sustaining themselves again. And I think there has been some preferential targeting, for example, those small businesses that have lost their implements and that have lost stock, and in some cases have lost their buildings, etc. There has been a move by relevant role players in government in particular to assist them, and that's what we talk about when we say preferential targeting. We say that this must continue because we do realize that there's some that may not have necessarily been reached. And of course, the continued support to livelihoods, particularly the support for business to ensure that they're able to create more jobs. We need an abundance of jobs. When people are able to have more decent jobs, they're able to care for themselves and their families a lot better. So I think this is an important thing, but intertwined to that is the issue of ensuring that we provide skills to people and opportunities for entrepreneurship. And I think this is important to get people up and running again and becoming sustainable. Lastly, Chair, the issue of readiness for pre- and post-disaster management. I think that what this disaster has taught us is to, and the effects of climate change, I think that what this disaster has taught us is to be more aware and to be more conscious of the fact that such disasters, especially those fashioned by climate change, are going to be a norm in most cases because of the increase of climate change. And we need to be ready. But we are saying that not just as government alone, it requires a coordinated approach between all sectors of society. So we're talking civil society, we're talking organizations like the Red Cross, the Gift of the Givers, and a number of churches and interfaith groupings. that are able to assist and communities, but we're also talking business and of course government for everybody to be ready for such disasters when they come. We're moving into a rainy season towards the end of the year. And again, we need to be ready for all of these things. So the education around the impacts of climate change becomes important at all levels so that people understand and there's early warning systems and early warning mechanisms to be able to provide, to assist people in getting themselves ready in the event there are disasters, and also the way in which we communicate, all of this is becoming more and more important. But lastly, I think one of the things we've started doing is we've started looking at some countries that have been prone to disasters. For example, the People's Republic of China, I think Bangladesh is another country, which are countries that face disasters in terms of floods, typhoons, cyclones, and so on and so forth. How they manage through their governments, but also working with civil society organizations like NGOs and business to be able to respond, firstly to ensure that there's readiness, but also, to be able to respond effectively and speedily to ensure the well-being and safety of people. So, Honorable Chair, I thought that, I'm sorry if I've gone a little bit longer, but this is the presentation that we prepared for this meeting. I hope that we were able to respond to the request as provided. I would leave it at that. And just to also indicate, I'm with the team from both SASA, the NDA, and the Department of Social Development, led by our Minister, in the meeting, and we'll then be ready to take questions from your good selves in this regard. I thank you very much.
Thank you, DG. You'll be working with your team and the Minister in dealing with the question, and we can confirm that most of the issues raised is part of what we experienced when we were in KZN. We'll know that your department is very key in addressing the plight of the people, given the issue of the floods, and it was immediately after COVID and the July 2021 unrest, so we had a critical challenge to deal with. My co-chair will deal with the part of the questions. Honorable Frolik.
No, thank you, Honorable Nyambi. I now invite questions from the members of the ad hoc committee, those who are physically present here, and I've also received an indication already from the Honorable Mkalipi, who's on the virtual platform for question. Let's start in this way, and happy Women's Month to all the women, those who are here. And
can I start, Chair?
No, we'll come to you. We'll come to you, Honorable Member. We start with the hands that I've seen here physically in the meeting, and then we will proceed to those on the virtual platform. We have number 1, number 2, and please, for sake of those who are following proceedings, just introduce yourself. Just your name, don't give your CV. Number 3, number 4, number 5, and the Honorable Mkalipi will be number 6. Let's start with number 1.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Bongiwe Mpingo Kikaba. I am the member of the committee. Chair, one concern that I want to raise, and I know that I have raised in this meeting before, is that as this ad hoc committee, we've got a mandate, and I think that was your response. I'm just referring to it as well. But both the Minister and the DG keeps on saying this is what we have done in the Northern Cape. And as it is not part of our mandate, but I think I must just raise it as a concern that there is money of government that is spent in the Northern Cape and under the name floods. But as this ad hoc committee, we keep on saying that is not part of our mandate. So I think we need to revise that, because ours is to do oversight, and where there is monies of government attached, we need to follow them. I'm just raising it as a concern. One thing which is very clear, and it is 4 months after these floods have started, particularly in the KZN. The reality is that there is still a lot that needs to be done, and I think this presentation actually is telling us that there is still a lot that needs to be done. And of course, we must say that we appreciate what government has done, but there are still people in halls, and which is, I think, my main concern. That's why I thought I need to speak. There are still people in halls, and in the presentation, we got to understand that there are even prepared meals that are being made. My question is, who is doing these prepared meals? Because the department, of course, would not have extra people that they had employed to prepare these meals. Who is preparing these meals? Because our understanding, actually what I just read recently, is that these people are even struggling for water, let alone food. They are saying they don't even have water to drink. So if there are people that are providing meals, and I'm not talking of perishable, I'm just talking of hot prepared meals, who is doing them and when are they given those particular meals, and who is monitoring that they are given those, if they can complain of water, food then is something else. There are issues of COVID, Chair. You have male, you have females, you have children, sleeping in one halls. And there are children who lost their families who are vulnerable. Of course, that alone is making them to be victims of rape. And it has been mentioned in the presentation that there are other children who have been raped as well. So, which means we are not helping in assisting those children to get out of that situation. They will continue to be raped if that is the situation. I mean, when you've got all genders in one room, people are vulnerable, people are stressed. Some of the people see sex as what they can do to take the stress out of themselves. There is mention of 62 TRUs. My question only on that is, are these TRUs only referred to eThekwini, or are they in other districts as well? And then the last issue, Jay, which I want to raise is the fact that the department has, and I want to commend that they have managed to work with businesses to get children that have lost everything back to school. Notwithstanding that many children did not go back to school. I mean, the teacher has said it themselves that they have tried to speak to them, and those children are saying, no, they have lost interest because they've lost everything. But with schooling, it can't end with getting a uniform and a shoe for a child to go to school. There are issues of books, there are issues of all other learning materials, which I know that is not the mandate of social development. I'm just raising it that there is a lot here that we need to get deeper in understanding how are these people helped. We are going to get reports, probably because our mandate is ending in November. But it will be said that next year we'll get a report that a percentage of these children in KZN did not go back to school because of the floods. And yet, even ourselves, we were given a responsibility to make sure that where we are able to save lives and where we are able to get lives to normality, we must do that. And we will all be at fault, even ourselves as the Oversight people will be at fault, because if there are children that can't go back to school even to date, if there are children who say, no, I've lost interest, and we leave it as it is, even ourselves, we are at fault, because every child deserves quality education, and we should be able to raise that as this committee. I know there are challenges of integration. I think the DG has also raised it, even amongst the departments themselves. And I don't know, I really don't know, why don't we get this thing right? We are governing for so many years, but it's a problem, an integration of departments to be able to work together to assist the needy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank Thank you. Number 2.
Thank you, co-chairs. Let me also greet all the members that are here and officials that are with us here. Let me also acknowledge the presentation and appreciate the work that has been done so far. However, I still agree with Honorable Bongiwe that there's a lot that still needs to be done. When you look at the presentation, it's almost 4 months, but we still have people who are in the shelters, which is very worrisome, and it needs our urgent attention, because that on its own is also creating problems for us. In the presentation that have been made by the department, it's indicated that they have provided 898 blankets and 888 mattresses, 676 dignitary packs for the people who have been housed in the shelters. As per the statistics that they've just presented now, they have indicated that we have about 8,400 people who are in the shelter. But the ones that were provided with mattresses, it's less than 1,000. That thing on its own is a challenge. So I would like to check with the department, what happened to this one who were unable to get your blankets and mattresses? Is there any coordinated program with other relevant stakeholders to assist them to get a better shelter for themselves also? Or is there any plan that were done beside the one of the department, or are they still sleeping on the floor? And then on the presentation also, it's also indicated that the shelter poses a threat for increasing gender-based violence cases and other related cases, and also on the issue of COVID. So I would like to check with the department, is there any cases of gender-based violence that have been reported so far from the shelters? And also in terms of COVID, were there any shelters that the cases of COVID were picked up? And what did the department do in that matter? And then on the last one, it's the status of the shelters. The reason why I'm asking is the status of the shelters is because we visited some shelters when we were in KZN, and we then realized that most of them were struggling, and at that time there was no tangible assistance from government. They were mostly relying on community assistance instead of government, of which we are not saying it's wrong, because this challenge of a disaster is for all of us. But I just want to check, in all these shelters that we have, has the department been able to assist all the shelters or a certain portion of the shelters? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Number 3.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Greetings to you, and also greetings to officials and our colleagues. I think questions that I was going to ask, they've been covered by my 2 colleagues, of which I'm not going to repeat them again. But what I would like to request to the department is the proper coordination plan. Because, I mean, we could see with the presentations, especially with me from KZN, and also with my constituency in Tongatel-Verulam. And there's a one Hallman view that has got 400 people, and you can imagine. And from then, we kept on going there, and we couldn't get the proper plan of coordination, who to talk to, or what we can do regarding that one. I think most of the questions my colleagues have covered me. I'm Lindwe Bibi from NCOP, part of this committee. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Thank you. Number 4.
Thank you, comrade co-chairs. My other name, other than being number 4, I am Lisa Mangu. I'm a member of this committee from the National Assembly. Thank you, Minister Zulu and your team for the presentation. Couple of questions. First one, you said in your presentation under services to shelters, I think it's slide number 6, that in the Northwest and the Eastern Cape, shelters affected, you said people have gone back to their homes. We were in the Northwest. I'm not aware of any people who were in shelters. What I am aware of are people who were taken in by their own families, and then they moved back when the environment became conducive. Can you be specific? Where were these shelters? How many people were there? And so that we know what we are talking about. That's number one. Under SASA subheading, SASA KZN intervention, you mentioned that there was burial support of 1,980. In that slide, you say times 2. I don't know what that means. If you could explain that. But what is not coming out here, and the impression we got when we were on the ground, was that social development was interacting with your AVBOBs, your Patrice Mutsepe Foundation, and the likes, who were supporting the families in terms of burial. And now there was also burial support. Do you have a consolidation? And if that consolidation is there, we would like to know it. Because one of our key things here is to follow the money. That is one of our responsibilities. We want to know where this money went to. Did it get to the right people? And as the co-chair started at the beginning. In your presentation on donations and coordination, that's the heading on your slide. There is no consolidated report. One would have loved after 4 months, we have a clear consolidated report. What came from what country, to whom, and what was the value thereof? Do you have it? If you have it, can we have it? If you don't have it, I'm sure we can have it at a later stage. You then say, and this particularly DG says, no, not DG, in that presentation, says the coordination is at provincial level of certain donations. The experience we have when we were at provinces, they were saying these international donors, they don't have control over. The coordination is at national sphere. Now you are saying it's at provincial. I'll give you a point example. While we were in KZN, Qatar was coming to do a donation. And I'm fully aware that the Premier was invited, he went there, but it was like as just part of the handover. They didn't have the details. Now here you are being told that this is happening at provincial level. Can we get clarity on that? Who is coordinating these international donations, and what is their value? Where did they go to? Then you have a slide about psychological support. Now, what is very much not clear here is what psychological support in numbers have you given, and what is being given as we speak now. You say there are people still in shelters. Obviously, there are a lot of people still distressed. What is being done as we speak now? How many families have you supported or have you reached? Or how many individuals? What has been the budget received or spent in terms of supporting those? In particular, one of the things that were raised, which will be my last one, is that there's this 1 billion rand that we believe was released. How much did this department receive of that money, if any? Or how much of this money was reprioritized where you might have had grants? The figures have been very thin in this presentation, and I'm very keen in knowing how much has been spent. Thank you, co-chairs.
Number 5.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Robert Mashiko. I'm a member of the committee representing the NA. Part of the questions, most of them are asked. Chair, The impression I am getting, even when reading other reports, just in advance, we do get a report that gives us the normal day-to-day work of the departments, which does not necessarily speak to what the second speaker said. Our mandate starts somewhere and it ends somewhere. For instance, if you still will be referred to the COVID-19 problems, which we have started in 2019 up to somewhere where the president declared that we might no longer have masks. It does not speak to our mandate. It is far beyond what we are supposed to be speaking to. We are going to end in November unless it is extended, and we're given specific responsibility to oversight. And as Mam Kigama have said, to deal with 3 provinces, KZN, Eastern Cape, and Northwest. So any other province that is get mentioned here, which might have benefited from the floods work, it might be fruitless in our view, because it is not part of what we're supposed to do. Just in question, we have, in the numbers that the minister said, I'm not correcting you. I'm reconfirming what you said.
Honorable members, address the chairperson and not one another. And don't interpret what others have said. Just continue with your input.
No, I was confirming what you said.
It's fine, continue.
Is it wrong to confirm?
No. Make your input and ask your questions. It's fine.
No, but how do you want to silence my speaking?
No, honorable members, no. Let us not go that way. Really.
What did I do wrong?
Honorable member, focus on your input. The honorable member does not take kindly to the fact that you are interpreting what she has said. So just focus on your input. That's fine.
No. No, I don't understand, Chair.
Honorable member, do you have a question or an input? You cannot keep this meeting now delayed because of an interpretation of what the other member has said. What is your question and input?
No, I'm making input, Chair. And
so make the input.
And I'm not the first speaker. How do I not confirm when others? Okay. I don't understand. What is the issue?
Those who will respond to the inputs that are made by members will be the minister and the...
I was
Honorable Mashiko, please continue. Otherwise, we proceed to the next speaker. Please proceed.
No, but don't treat me like that, Chair.
Honorable member, there's chairpersons, and you are also a chairperson of a committee. And you know how members and chairpersons conduct meetings. So let's stick to the rules as it is there. You are not being treated differently or separately. Make your input and ask your question. What is so difficult about that? You are chairperson of a committee of parliament. You should know that.
No, this is, I don't understand. Okay, fine. In the input by the minister, she said that there is 482 households. And in figures, in that April, there was 8,400 people. So we understand that household might not necessarily be equal to people, because you might find that in a household there is 5, 6, 7 people in one household. However, then we have got 862 TRUs that are built according to them, and 720 of them are occupied. Now, if we had 482 households, my assumption is that the family household is built to a family. Now, we have got 482 households, but you are building 862 TRUs. Who are we building for? because the households are only 482. But in the process, also, there are already 720 of those TRUs that are occupied. But you still have got people who are not yet allocated to a TRU. I don't get a sense to that point. And I think I must appreciate the fact that, of course, in numbers, we have moved from 8,400 to 6,551 in July. I'm not sure where are we in April, that number. But there's still quite a lot of people that are still in shacks. I mean, in homes, as compared to the TRUs. The other question, Chair, the social relief distress vouchers, 1,908, what informs that figure? I mean, the government is paying 350 rand to people who are not employed. I'm not sure whether there is a special dispensation for people who are affected by floods with a specific number to 1,080. If that is the case, it's acceptable. But then, as per the, and I wanted to ask the very same question as Mango asked, is what informs then the double payment of 1,080 if it is for burial purposes? Is it because we believe burial, for you to bury someone, you need 3,960? I wouldn't know. Finally, the TRU, the TRU it's an abbreviation of the transitional residential unit. It must have a time frame. It starts from today and it ends at some point. And it must be demolished, to be honest, after that, or it must be removed and put somewhere else in order to deal with the disaster that might come later. When we were in KZN and went to areas where we believe, in the absence of a TRU, in that house there shall be no house. In that family, there shall be no house. Are you still calling it a TRU? And is it because we have a plan to want to build a permanent structure? If yes, by when? Yeah, I think the other questions were raised by other members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. There's two interventions from the virtual platform, the Honourable Mkalipi, followed by the Honourable Brouteseth. Honourable Mkalipi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, co-chairs. That is the disadvantage of being on the virtual. We are treated as a stepchildren. But nevertheless, Chair, I just want to check with the department after the presentation from the DG, starting from the opening remarks from the Minister. First of all, Chair, on the burial scheme, I just want to check one thing. There is an issue that I raised from day one when we debate the issue of floods on April. And unfortunately, the part of it is that the Premier of KZN is no longer the Premier now, who assist with the matter. And my prediction is that when the new Premier, who has just been sworn in yesterday, when she comes, it will start all over again. And I think it's unfair with the Ubuthelezi family who have not received this intervention from the government. So I just want to check with the department if they know about this particular case in Ward 57, which has been raised and is recorded in Parliament about that family. That is one. Number two, I just concur with other members who are saying that this is very unfortunate. 4 months later, we are still receiving such a report, which also the department on their own presentation are saying on the challenges, they are still frustrated with the people who are still on shelters. So therefore now, if the department comes here, also said to us they have challenges because there is no clear direction how and when are those people are going to be removed from those shelters. The point that I'm trying to drive home is to ask from the minister if is any coordinated effort from her department with the Department of Human Settlement. it also goes back what I have said earlier on in terms of the change of government in KZN. Joe Mosbiya, if he comes back, it will be well and good, but I doubt. And then all again, it will go back to where to the new MEC who's going to say he has to study the report and also just not know what needs to be done in terms of going forward and how long are those people are going to be there in the shelters. The second point that I want to make, Chair, is that I just want to thank the Deputy Minister of the Social Development, she's always available on the phone. I wish I can say the same thing with the Minister of the Department, whereby we send SMSs and there's no response, especially during the time of need. But on my engagement with the Deputy Minister of the Department at some point, she shared with me some of the frustration of the department. At one point, they have to change the car from the department because whenever they go with intervention in terms of food, because we can't run away from the fact that there's poverty in this country. And even people who are not affected by floods, but they are affected with poverty. So the minute they see the car carrying food to go and intervene on those shelters, the community go and attack that car. At some point, they have to change the strategy. So what is the issue now? So can the latest report in terms of intervention? Because I heard the minister was also complaining that when the floods were still fresh, everyone was interested of helping, but now since it has been 4 months, no one is helping except the department. And then the second point is that I just want to get a clarity from the minister and the department as well. The latest news is that there were people who have been kicked out in Montclair in KZN. I think on the past weekend, as it's Thursday today, those people were occupying a building from Transnet, and it was illegal occupants. Those people who have been victims of floods from Umlazi. So what is the status of those people? And amongst those people, there were a child who was doing a matric. And then when I was listening to the DG, also articulating some frustration that amongst those people who are still on shelters, people who are supposed to be at school are not at school. So what is the latest report in terms of those particular areas? The last point, Chairperson, when I engage on the slides called psychosocial services, I want to ask from the minister, since we have around 2,000 social workers in KZN alone who are unemployed, why are you not also using them in this time of need? Because when you engage in the slides that were presented here by the DG, it suggests that those people who are affected by floods, they need to go and get counseling. And according to the slides here and the presentation, the department does not have enough resources. But I think that if we can also have those unemployed social workers to come and intervene in the department, we can see umehluko. The last one point, Chairperson, that I want to ask, while I'm also talking about social workers intervention from the department to take those who are not employed, do you also as a department train your own social workers who are in the system? I'm asking this, Chair, because when this disaster started, all of us, ground forces, all of us as members of parliament, as activists, we were all on the ground trying to assist our communities. But the situation that I come across with a person who's in charge of social workers in Newtown A, Ematendeni, in KZN, was very shocking to me. And I also reported this matter to Mrs. Vilikazi, who is in charge for KZN. Unfortunately, the DG of the department, I want to escalate this matter, but he didn't pick up his phone. But at least Mrs. Vilakazi also attended to the matter, not until it's completed. So I'm asking if the social workers who can be sensitive on the issues of people, especially if there's a disaster like floods, do you as a department train your own social workers to be very insensitive on the issues that are affecting the communities during this trying, during this need of difficult times? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. The Honourable Brouteseth.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Firstly, thank you very much for allowing us to participate on a hybrid format. I just want to make the point that we are not disloyal if we are not there with you in the room. It's just that many of us have schedules that are planned months in advance, and this visit was fairly at short notice. So please understand that we are not being disloyal by not being there. Chairperson, I have 4 issues, and I won't make 4 into 8. It is really just 4 issues. First of all, thank you to Linton for the sorry, I don't know your surname, it's not on the screen, but thank you very much for your presentation. Linton, I'm concerned that you refer to going forward that we need to really rely on the private sector to assist government in doing its job. Now, the private sector, with all the fantastic work they do, have finite resources. They have resources nowhere near as much as government. And so we cannot be relying on the private sector going forward in our country to always back up the government. The government is the entity we pay our taxes to, and the government will stand fully 4 square in front of the problem and fix it. We cannot rely on the private sector all the time, so please take it into account. The issue about community halls. Chair, Honourable Folek, I've raised this with Honourable Nyambi, and I also raised it and shared photographs with Honourable Minister Gundubele last week about a particular community hall called Mountain View Community Hall, which I see Linton mentioned that they visited Verulam, and that community hall is actually in Verulam. There are 400 people staying in that hall at the moment, living in an environment where you could actually be almost tempted to launch a South African Human Rights Commission complaint against that environment. And so the question I have to Linton and to the Minister is anything being done to ameliorate the circumstances at the Mountain View Community Hall, which is just untenable. The other issue that came up during our oversight visits that we conducted, but also an oversight visit I've conducted myself, is not all community halls have electricity available for running cooking operations, and or they don't have electrical stoves to plug in to run cooking operations. And so gas is a big problem. Bottles of gas. It appears that the Department of Social Development has not thought of that and has not taken that into account in terms of supplying gas to these community halls. Literally, as a result, these community halls are the folks there that have taken it on themselves to feed those in the community halls. They are volunteers, people that reside in the hall. They step up and they volunteer, and that we are indebted to them for that. But they're not having any much support from DSD in terms of gas that they need to do the cooking. So I think that's something that we need to, whilst the situation persists, something we need to take into account. And then finally, Chairperson, the final 4th point is the rollout of the TRUs. Many members have mentioned it. It's unfortunate we're not meeting with the Department of Human Settlements today, but that has to be expedited. That is at the core of why the community halls are still full. They have to be sorted out ASAP. I've read various reports from Provincial, and it seems that one of the major stumbling factors is land, where these TRUs can be built. So please, can there be some sort of acceleration or some sort of directive from this committee to the Human Settlements Department, or can they be called in the next 2 days to provide an update? But I think we need to really light the fire at their feet and say, guys, this is not good enough. We have to get these TRUs out as quick as possible. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm not going to debate the issue of the attendance of members. When this committee was formed, it was clear in the Chief Whip's Forum that members will prioritise the activities of this committee, even during constituency periods. But we will deal with the matter outside this. This is the last hybrid session anyway that we're having. In future, we expect members to attend physically. I will now hand over to the G to respond to the matters that has been raised. A lot of them are linked to the TRUs, the temporary residential units or transitional residential units. And we are going to that province to go and do a follow-up, and we'll pay specific attention to some of the matters that has been raised, because it is worrying seeing some of the reports that are coming through. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairpersons and Honorable Members. I would ask the DG and the team, so that the specific questions that are being asked, the team must also assist the DG in responding, and I will come at the end of their response. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. The DG and other officials.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, for the questions asked. I'm going to ask a few of my colleagues to respond. I will start with Jabavu in KZN, at SASA, to respond to the questions around the double payments, but also really speaking to the amounts of money that we provide in terms of social relief of distress, as well as the burial support that we provide and special dispensations. Let's go to you, Jabavu. Immediately after you, I'm going to ask Isabella to respond to the impact on children and the issues related to children in the main. Let's go for that for now. Jabavu?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. My name is Mlimbile Jabavu from SASA, KwaZulu-Natal. I will respond to the two issues, one raised by the Honorable Member, Manu, in terms of the consolidated figures for the burial support. Yes, we do have the consolidated list of the people that we have assisted for the 325 fatalities, where we have provided support, and that information is also been audited by the Auditor General, as they are doing the real-time audit. So on the second one, for Honorable Mashiko, in terms of what informs the figure of the 1980, the 1980 is in terms of the SASA disaster guideline in terms of responding to the disasters as guided by the Disaster Management Act. So the figure is an equivalent of an old age grant, which is a figure determined which actually assists in terms of providing things like food and things like other household when people are actually being affected by the disaster. But in terms of providing the 1,980 times 2 for the burial, for the disease, for the fatalities, then that also is meant to assist the families whilst they are preparing for the funeral. It's not like we're saying the amount.
Mr. DG, the official that is currently addressing us, we can't see the official, nor can we properly hear what the official has to say. You see, this is one of the drawbacks of sitting on a virtual platform trying to deal with urgent matters and important issues. So let's go to somebody else who can respond, that is audible and that we can see, and then we'll get back to the person that was doing the brief reply now. Can you just coordinate for that for us with your officials, DG?
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. My sincere apologies for that. Can we go to Isabella to respond to the issues of children, but also Isabella, the training of social workers, and then immediately after that, I'll go to Peter to respond to the issues of food provision. Isabella, please be audible and make sure your video is clear and put it on, please, Isabella. Isabella? Okay, let's go to Peter. Peter, can you respond to the questions around food? Who's providing the food, and so on and so forth? Please, Peter.
Thank you very much, DG. Thanks very much, honorable members. I hope you can see me. I can't see myself.
Yes, we also can't see you.
Chair. You can
see camera on, Peter. Yeah, put your camera on, please.
Yes, here we are. Thank you very much. This is Peter Nechipare, DDG for Community Development. With regard to the provision of food, at the beginning of this disaster, a lot of donors flocked to the area to support the families that were affected and at the different shelters. And we saw a lot of donations for food and for mattresses and other things from different areas. And some donations that arrived were in the form of food themselves, foodstuffs themselves. And as time goes on, some of the things dwindled, but the department has got community nutrition development centers. Those shelters that are close to the CNDCs, they receive their food from the CNDCs, which means the meals are cooked and provided to them on a daily basis. And as time goes on, they were allowed, the Church of Christ donated food to the shelters. The report we have now is that some shelters cook their own food at the current moment. Some food are donated from the private sector. There's a lot of non-profit organizations that have come on board that are providing food, and some tried even to donate water. And then some provide meals on a daily basis to different shelters. At the current status where we have is a mixture of the food that are provided by the CNDCs, Community Nutrition Development Centers on the cooked meals, and then including the shelters that are cooking for themselves and donated food that are coming cooked. But also the role of the department and the Department of Health and the Department of Social Development is the quality assurance. If you receive cooked meals, that food needs to be quality assured so that there's no adverse effect. And I think since then, there's never been any adverse effect in terms of the meals that are there. It is not enough, but I think the provision, we are coordinating that the families that are in shelters are provided with food. Thank you very much. Isabella provide the response on children or child protection programs that we have. Over to you, Isabella.
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, Minister, and colleagues. The issue of impact of children in the shelters, Chairperson, we assessed the situation and we realized that we cannot mix children with older people, and then we tried to remove the children, and put them into alternative care. However, the parents refused us, to take the children. And in terms of the Children's Act, Chapter 2, it empowers them that, children must remain in the care of their families or parents, especially when they have capacity, to do so. So it was very difficult for us, to be able to remove children. However, in terms of the reports we got from provinces, there is no case that has been reported in terms of the children who have been raped, except only one case, of a 23-year-old woman, which the province has been able to deal with. They've been able, to provide psychosocial support, but also refer it, to the police for their attention. That is in terms of that. Any GBV cases that have been reported in the shelters, there is none that that the department know of. Now, in terms of the social workers, the training of social workers, the curriculum is such that it really empowers social workers, to deal with people. However, we've got, we are working in partnership with the South African Council for Social Service Professions, which basically promote, the profession of social work, but also it protects, the beneficiaries. And therefore, there is, a course, that is being, not a course per se, but a program or a training that is being offered, working together with the department, the issue of ethics course, where we empower social workers in terms of ensuring that they adhere to code of ethics. And any any such incidents that are being picked up should be reported to the council, because the council is there to protect the beneficiaries, as I've already said. I don't know, Chairperson or DJ, if I have responded to all the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabella. I want to just check, Chabavu, are you back on track? Chabavu, can you go on?
Is your method audible now?
It's better?
Am I audible?
Yes, please proceed. Although you can try and close the window behind you, the curtain, so that we are able to see you better. That's better. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair, and also thank you, Honorable Members. I'm going to respond to the two questions that were raised by first one, Honorable Manu, relating to the consolidated list for the barrier support that we provided for KwaZulu-Natal. Yes, we do have a consolidated list of all the people that we have assisted, 225 in total that we have assisted. So that list is also being audited by the Auditor General as they are doing their real-time audit. So we can provide the list if it is needed. Then relating to the question raised by Honorable Mashego relating to the figure of 1,980. That figure is in terms of the SASSA disaster guideline, which is informed by the Disaster Management Act in response to only the disasters. So that figure is an equivalent to an amount that is provided through an old age grant. So that figure is meant to cater for things like groceries and other households that the person who is coming from the shelter, or a person who has been recommended by the disaster management to be assisted, that it can be able to utilize that amount to buy the necessities, especially also to replace the food that might have been lost during the disaster. And the issue of the double amount of the 980 is also an equivalent to an old age grant, but it is not really meant to say that a family can use that amount to bury the family, but it's meant to assist the family whilst they are preparing for the burial for their loved ones. So that, as we know, that people from time to time, they come and visit the families, and the families need to provide some tea and other stuff to the people that are visiting. So it's only meant to cater for those instances. So I think I have responded to the three issues that have been raised by the Honorable Member. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chababu. I think, Honorable Chair, let me just take a few questions very quickly. Firstly, by starting with indicating that it was my error in highlighting the Northern Cape. It's only the Northwest and the Eastern Cape. I apologize profusely for that. The presentation does say Northwest. I said Northern Cape, so I apologize for that. It's certainly Northwest and not the Northern Cape. Secondly, just to add to, in terms of who's providing the meals, I think I want to highlight the fact that we're not the only ones as government that is providing the meals. We work very closely with NGOs to assist in providing the meals. And for example, we've worked with organizations like the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. We've worked with and other interfaith organizations across the religious spectrum. We've also worked very close. For example, the church has indicated and has provided support to all shelters that are currently in existence for a period of 3 months. So there's support that's coming from them, particularly in the eThekwini district. But also we have Meals on Wheels, we have Food First, we have the Action Development Agency in Bumba Foundation, and a number of other organizations which I may not remember offhand. But just to also highlight the fact that we have our own, as a department, as Peter indicated, what we call Community Nutrition and Development Centers, CNDCs. And in eThekwini alone, I think, in Durban on the whole, I think we have just over 90, if I'm not mistaken. And these are places where people can come and access food and access different levels of support, because it also serves as a community development center. And those have been fully operational and providing support to people as well. Yes, the TRU's aspect is only in eThekwini, Honorable Bongiwe. We do not highlight the other districts because we're still waiting for data coming from the province in that regard. I think Issa spoken on the impact of children. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we're working very closely with UNICEF and other organizations, credible organizations, to try and get children back into school. But this real-time monitoring tool that we've done also gives us a needs analysis and gives us a sense of what interventions are required by who. So we have been sharing this with other government departments. We haven't officially launched the results, but we've been sharing with education and other relevant departments and health to ensure that they see the impact on children and they take a lead in the areas that relate to their mandate in order to move on that. Honorable Tiseko, just to indicate that we do rely on other players and other organizations to work with us in the provision of support to shelters. So the mattresses that we highlighted there is only SASA. We have not gone into depth of other donors that have also provided a number of mattresses. And then the issue of, I think it was Honorable Mojapele who asked around, we agree with you, Honorable Mojapele, around the coordination. We definitely need to improve our coordination overall, and again, not just as government, but all sectors of society. And to Honorable, I'm sorry, I forgot the Honorable Member who asked about the number, a consolidation of number of shelters in the Northwest and in the Eastern Cape. In the Eastern Cape, there was a focus in Or Tambo and Chokaba districts, and I think there were about 3 to 5 shelters, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't think there were more than 5. That has indicated very minimal people and they've moved out. And in the Northwest, it was around 33 people in 4 shelters in Nakamodiri. In Nakamodiri. And then I think the numbers we are projecting, especially in the Northwest and in the Eastern Cape, were those shelters that were prepared at the height of the disaster and have since closed. That's what we're trying to say. So we're not saying the shelters are up and running at the moment. We said at the height of the disaster, those were available for people to move into. Some were not even fully occupied by residents. Yes, there has been work done by AirBob and Procurement Foundation and other organizations in providing burial support. The government has worked with these organizations. What we are reporting on is what we have done as social development in the context of the request of the committee in terms of our mandate. So we've reported on that, but we are certainly aware of the support provided by other organizations such as the Procurement Foundation and AFBOB in particular. Yes, we are able to provide you a consolidated list of the amounts and the specific donations by various countries. And just to highlight that, when we say we are coordinating the donors, we are coordinating the donors that are from foreign countries because we are the national department. In the province, they continue to coordinate other donations from private sector, from civil society and other members of society and so on. So we've managed together with COPTA and Turco the coordination of support that has been provided, and we work very closely with the province, and everything is completely accounted for, and we are able to share that list with you yourselves, Honorable Chairs. Yes, the TRU matters is a matter that is largely in the hands of COPTA and the Department of Human Settlements, and we have engaged with them and impressed upon them the importance of moving with speed on some of these matters because of the ripple effect it has on other organizations like ourselves. Honorable Nkalipi, let me apologize for having missed your call. I think Honorable Nkalipi knows that I always respond to her calls and always respond to her messages when she sends them to me. So at this point in time, I must sincerely apologize. It may have been an omission on my end, and I apologize. I will certainly pick up on the matter. I've asked the team to give us full details on how they're handling the Buthelezi matter. I do think that the province has been on top of that. I will follow up with the team accordingly and give you responses on the municipality in that regard. I think the coordination efforts, yes, I want to say that on the municipality there are coordination efforts, and we have driven the call for those, even within the context of the structures that I spoke to at the beginning of the presentation, and the various subcommittees, so that we've highlighted these things and the impact with other task teams as well, so that we can ensure that we are able to move on this. Let me say, Honorable Nkalipi, my team is on the ground as we speak right now, going to the Transnet shelter that has been closed. I've been talking endlessly to the DG of Public Enterprises about this matter and Transnet, and I wanted to ask what are the reasons, what is the status quo, and as soon as the team comes back from that shelter today, we will give you a full update on that Transnet shelter. Even last night, I've been on the line talking to the DGs and the colleagues at Transnet, finding out what is the context around this, and we are going to send the team on the ground today to go and visit and come back with clear feedback for you on that matter. Yes, I want to agree, Honorable Nkalipi. The issue of unemployed social workers, we have deployed some into some of these areas. We've also made a call to the Treasury to increase funding for additional social workers, because at the heart of it all, we need more social workers in order to respond, not to respond as such, but in order to ensure that we are proactive against social ills and other challenges that may occur. And indeed, there is a training that we do, as Isabella indicated, that we do for social workers. The debriefing is that the training, especially on trauma, we've worked with a number of organizations to be able to provide specified training on some of these aspects. You would recall that even when the first group of COVID-19 people came from China, it was our social development who provided very specialized training when they came with the 2 planes that landed from China. We were able to assist. So yes, we do tailor-make some of the training to some of the areas that we work to. Maybe just lastly, Honorable Chair, just 2 things. To Honorable, I think it's Honorable Tim. What we are suggesting is not that the private sector alone should be the ones who should provide funding. We're saying we need a coordinated approach of private sector, government, civil society, NGOs, and all sectors of society. We think that this is the best approach to resolve the challenges that we face, particularly in responding to the issues of disaster. And by the way, let me just also add, Honorable Tim, that private sector are actually a corporate citizen in themselves and have a duty and responsibility to assist in areas through what we normally call corporate social investment. So they have a responsibility. It shouldn't be us calling upon them, because it should be natural by virtue of being a corporate citizen in themselves through CSI. And my own view is that we haven't unlocked all the funding, the necessary funding, even within private sector. I think as government, if you were to highlight the quantum of money that we've assisted people with, it is extremely huge. And we are simply saying that we can do a little bit more, but we need others to also come to the party and begin to unlock some of the fundings within they afford to assist in some of these instances. And I must also add that we've had very successful partnerships with the private sector in working through disasters and other related challenges that we face as government. We are consistently signing very creative MOUs, innovative MOUs and partnerships with various corporates across the spectrum in South Africa, who are really coming to the fore and assisting because of this learning that they have around this corporate social investment that they have. And so we are beginning to unlock a lot of that, and we think that this is a very important aspect within the context of our work. Then lastly, so I must also add that it's really not only about the money, it's also about the technical expertise and support that we can get from organizations in the private sector who seem to do some of this work much more better than most other organizations, or at least that are able to complement the work that we do as government and work together within that context. But also, we have very, very good NGOs that we support as government in the whole, who are carrying out a fantastic job on the ground, and we are working very closely with them as well. So it's not about the money only, it's about the technical support and expertise, and we can list a range of organizations that we ourselves as DSD have worked with. So, Honorable Chair, I think we've responded to the bulk of the messages of the questions. Those that we've not been able to, we will certainly be able to provide those in writing to yourself and the committee. I want to thank you at this point. I will hand over then to our Honorable Minister to hand over back to the Chair of the Ministerial and who will hand over to the Minister.
Well, thank you very much for the reply. I now hand over to the Minister to briefly conclude the deliberations on this topic. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I think that the team responded to most of the questions. The first thing that I would like to say, Chairperson, is to sincerely thank the communities around where the shelters are, those communities that have been able to support our people, because we believe as a Department of Social Development, and we are also working with the communities to say it's our collective responsibility to help the people. So those who are within the range of supporting these communities must. I would also like to thank a lot of the shelters that we have. Many of them are halls that belong to churches, and it is the women-owned churches in particular that really stepped up. They go beyond just giving the shelter. They also organize in helping that the people who are in the shelters are able to form themselves into proper units of leading themselves, because when all is said and done is when people themselves take responsibility. I want to also indicate that the Department of Social Development was not providing gas. I'm responding to the honorable member who spoke about the issue of availability of gas. We were not providing that as a department, but when we went onto the ground and realized that people were cooking in the outside, we then provided the industrial stoves, we provided the pots, also the big pots for people to cook. We also intervened, Chairperson, because in some of the areas I went to in KwaZulu-Natal, I found that our own members, own people who were in the shelters, were beginning to quarrel and wanting to cook individually, but we intervened in such a way that they cannot do that, because the food also that we receive from donors, it comes in packs, and therefore it needs to be unpacked, and they also need to work very closely with each other. The issue of social workers, Chairperson, just this morning I had a conversation with the Minister of Finance, because as a Department of Social Development, we're looking for the resources for making sure that the social workers are properly employed and get properly paid for the work that they do, and others we might even take at the level of volunteers, but we don't necessarily want to take them at the level of volunteers, because we think they must properly be remunerated for the work that they do. So we are working with the Department of Finance and looking for other alternatives, but also other departments have social workers, and we're trying to make sure that we have that in a coordinated manner. I agree also with Linton, in particular with regard to the issue of the private sector. Private sector has got resources which they themselves say it's their responsibility to provide and assist with us, but we are saying, can we have a coordinated manner in which we are doing that? Lastly, Chairperson, as the ADG has indicated, we will have to provide a report to yourselves with the specifics of the areas which were requested for, specifically data and information, right down to family, right down to individual, right down to the places where we have given the support. And Honorable Kalipi in particular speaks to the fact that there's a new premier, there's new everything. May I indicate to this meeting that we are one government, and therefore it's lessons learned for us when new people come in, there's different changes. We have agreed as the government of the African National Congress that we must end that. And with the premier who has arrived here, in particular, I think she herself has made it very clear of the continuity that needs to happen, because it's about not servicing us, it's about servicing the people. So we will, as a Department of Social Development, engage with a new premier, not with an intention of starting from scratch. It is a continuity of what was already done by the previous premier. And if there's going to be any changes, we will have to move from a continuity point of view. And like the ADG has said, if Honorable Mkalipi feels that I did not respond to her calls, I also wish to apologize if I've missed her calls, but also indicate to this meeting, Honorable Chair, that the kind of calls and the kind of SMSs and the kind of responses I have to do to the entire South Africa, I do my best to respond, and if she feels I didn't respond, I like the DG, I will apologize for that and say that she must please appreciate that it's not that one would not respond for any other reason. It is just because really the number of people, because of the responsibility of social development, is quite huge and heavy on us, but we will do our best to do so. And also to indicate, Honorable Mkalipi, when the DM responds to you, the DM is not responding to you in isolation of our collective work that we do. So I'm happy when you say that the DM responds. She will respond because she is available, because she was also on the ground much longer than myself, because I have to cover the entire country. It's not to say that I didn't respond to you for any other reason. And if the DM responded, I'm very happy that she did respond to you. And quite frankly, I don't want to play politics here. I want to be a responsible minister who is leading a portfolio of DSD, of NDA, as well as SASA, and to say to the members, we give it our best. Where we are weak, we'll keep trying and make sure that we respond correctly to the needs of our people. What we have done is not adequate, is not enough, but we're doing our best to make sure that we pool our resources together, but also we coordinate. I see members are talking about coordination. I fully agree with the members. I can tell you that we have systems in place from a point of view of the structures. When we say we've got COPTA, we've got provincial coordination, we've got that going, but our weakness is ensuring that there is continuity, and our weakness is ensuring that we talk to each other, we communicate with each other at all times. This is where we need to strengthen our response to disaster management. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, and also to the DG and the officials from your department. Obviously, there are certain key areas that emanated out and the questions that members have focused. The research team, together with the committee section, will communicate with the department on those specific issues, because that will form the basis and the background for our return visit to KwaZulu-Natal. I think the honourable members will agree that it is very discomforting and distressing to see the conditions under which some of our people are still subjected to in those areas. And it is thus important that we get first-hand information on the ground to see what changes have taken place, how their lives have improved, and what we can expect the department to conclude. We'll be there within the next 14 days. So please, honourable members, please keep your diaries open for that last week in August, because we are going to go back to the provinces, and the program will be communicated to the relevant departments as well. Honourable members, we'll now have a 10-minute break until 11:30, and then we'll come back to engage transport. Thank you.
Is it not possible in order to contact her to find out the situation?
Recording stopped.
Please assist.
In some countries, no, it wasn't the risk of the pandemic. In some countries, definitely.
Thank you very much. Okay. Recording in progress.
I don't know whether I'm audible.
You are more than audible, Deputy Minister. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, co-chairpersons of the Ad hoc Joint Committee, Honorable Frolik and Honorable Nyambi, members of the National Assembly, and members of the NCOP, our Acting Director General of the Department of Transport, Mr. Ngwako Makaepia, and senior officials from all departments that are in attendance, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. The April 2022 floods resulted in loss of lives, left hundreds of people unable to have access to amenities such as access to hospitals, schools, clinics, areas of work, etc., due to damages to roads, bridges, and some railway lines. For damages to the road infrastructure, we appointed someone as the coordinator. And of course, for rail infrastructure, we appointed PRASA as the coordinator, working together with the TFR, which is Transnet Freight Rail. There have been several ministerial engagements with various MSs that took place, including joint site visits, inspections with other ministers, as well as meetings with political leadership at provinces. You will know, members, that SANRAL implemented a waiver on toll fees at Otongati and Invoti toll plazas on the N2 toll road to assist those communities whose alternative roads had actually been damaged by the floods as a temporary measure. This decision will be reviewed and rescinded as and when things return to normal. The repair of the alternative roads, while these interim measures that I've referred to are in place, is being prioritized and accelerated so as to make it possible for the affected communities to be able to use alternative roads again as soon as possible. Our presentation today will indicate progress that we are making in this regard. Honorable members, following the assessment that was done by provinces and other spheres of government, SANRAL seconded a professional team to do further assessment in KwaZulu-Natal and of course in the Eastern Cape. Details of their findings in the form of projects have actually been captured on the SANRAL mobile app. SANRAL will and is implementing some of the projects on behalf of road authorities in line with provisions of the SANRAL Act as per formal appointments by road authorities. Also, honorable members, we appointed, in fact, a rapid response team was established by the Minister of Transport, Honorable Fikile Mbalula, for the coordination, monitoring, and implementation of the plan, and it provides ongoing updates to the ministry, and it puts together a formal progress report, which is what we will be reporting about today at this meeting. Engagements also have been held with the National Disaster Management Center to provide feedback on the response plans and commitments to ensure alignment of all processes and avoid duplication of efforts, which members, even in this meeting, have raised sharply. Engagements with National Treasury on the consideration of financial proposal is also on course. Together with the Department of Public Enterprises, we will be reporting on the work done to repair rail infrastructure and ensure that rail services continue and return to normal.
At this moment, Chairperson, I will hand over to our Acting Director General of the Department of Transport to provide a detailed presentation on the progress with regards to work completed and the work in progress to address transport infrastructure. I hand over to Acting DG with your permission, Chairperson. Thank you.
Eastern Cape and Northwest provinces, and the rail infrastructure, precisely more of PRASA. Then we'll then demonstrate what then becomes the progress to date in terms of the intervention that we have made across the board, and we'll lastly end with the recommendation. Chair, we will all appreciate as part of the background that the April 2022 floods have resulted in a loss of life and left hundreds of homeless and unable to have access to basic amenities because of this kind of infrastructure that has been affected, which obviously deprive them of access to a number of critical areas and services, inclusive of hospitals, shops and clinics. And we are therefore in this slide, Chair, at a high level demonstrate what were those damages that we have had, both on the road infrastructure side and the rail infrastructure precisely on the PRASA side, and some were then affected even Transnet Freight Rail, because there are instances where we share the network. In the damages to road infrastructure, we had instances where the damages included issues around road layers, they washed away the mudslides, the drainage, sinkholes, slip failures, and the gabion wing walls that were washed across our road network. In terms of the rail infrastructure, we had the rail tracks damage, we have the drainage structures blocked, relay rooms, and flooded, including the electrical cables, which then become very difficult for us to be able to have a safe train movement in that particular regard. With regard to the extent of the damages, on the next slide, which really talks to PRASA, what we have analyzed is that the overall flood damages in terms of the work in that particular space was around 796 million, which really we were affected in this particular instance as PRASA in terms of coming back from COVID. We had a program of the resumption of service. So with the flood, then that affected us. And the areas that were affected, there was areas around Umlazi, Kwamashu, Pine Town, and the South Coast, which were really severely damaged. that affected the train movement. In terms of assessment of the damages, the amount that we have get as the overall cost is around 2.8 billion, and the work is consistent in terms of various work packages, which the phase one being really how do we then deal with the flood damage repairs so that we are able to enable trains to move and we can offer services to our people. And the phase two is really what then becomes the long-term plan in terms of the resuscitation of train services in that particular element. The next slide, Chair, demonstrate the damages that we have had in KZN specifically, and most of the damages we have had was on the N2, where there was a need for both minor and majority repairs for us to be able to deal with the situation ahead. And there was a bit of damages on the N3 side, on the Kato Ridge, and the number of intersections there and the slip failures in terms of the road section are then identified in the presentation. But key to us, what then became the effect of Sandral in this particular regard is that in addition to the damages that has been made on the repairs of the roads, there were issues around loss of income, because as some of the intervention, like the Deputy Minister has alluded to, we had to boom up operation on some of the toll to ensure that there is a smooth flow of traffic as part of the response from the Transport Department. Moving to the next slide, which is really Northwest, because that's one of the provinces that we're supposed to cover in terms of our report, the Audit Committee. We therefore report that there were damages that were experienced in terms of the road infrastructure. That's between December 2021 and January 2022. And based on the assessment, the damages were quantified to be around 4 billion, and that included issues around structures wash away and a couple of bridge collapses in that particular element. And the areas that have been affected in the district in the province include various districts, Ngagamudiri, Mulema, Bujanal District, Kenneth Kaunda. And what the province has done within the available resources was to really, how do they get into a process of engagement to repair some of the roads initially, as to allow a safe movement of communities and passengers. Obviously, in that justification, there has been some shortfall, which they have submitted to the National Department, and I'll deal with that in the coming slides. With regard to the Eastern Cape, there have been some damages in the Eastern Cape as a result of various floods that occurred between December and January, and the assessment that we have done in terms of the road network there, in terms of the kilometers that have been identified and the structures, it's around 1.3 billion in that regard. And then the slide there talks to the areas that had been affected, and that was done based on the assessment that we have done as the Department of Transport in conjunction with Sandral, because we did dispatch the team, in-house teams, technical capacity that we have within Sandral to be able to do this work. And the next slide demonstrate in each region the kind of assessment that we have done. That's the assessment according to the district, and the cost you'll see the work that has been done in terms of OR Tambo, the number of roads that has been damaged, what is the kilometers in terms of the road network, the number of bridges that have been damaged in that regard, and the same elements continues in terms of the various region of the province of the Eastern Cape. And the next slide, Chair and honorable members, demonstrate the assessment that we have done in really assisting the provinces as a transport sector, and to then demonstrate that the work has been done by our own technical capacity that we have within our entity to be able to assist the three provinces with regard to that. And I think it was critical for us to do that intervention and assessment, because in us doing our work and quantifying the financial resources and our coordination with the National Disaster Management Center, it's very important that there is a process of verification and validation so that we don't duplicate the resources. And even in the submission that we then submit to the National Treasury, we'll have to demonstrate that that work has already happened. And what we then did in that process of assessment, Sandral did develop an app where those assessments have been captured so that we are able to then map the areas, so that when we then engage with the road authorities in terms of implementation, it is very clear in terms of the work that we need to do. We know that the KwaZulu-Natal provinces was the worst affected in terms of the floods, and the initial estimated amount for the repairs was estimated at around 5.7 billion across the board. And with regard to obviously looking at the reprioritization and further assessment that we have done, the amount came to around 2.99 billion. And Treasury themselves had to, KZN DOT themselves has to then make sure that they submit a reprioritized budget within the province and the resources that they are available, where they are able to, which was supported by their provincial treasury. And in that particular instances, they were able to prioritize around 730 project at that cost of 2.9 billion, which we will talk to those issues in the following slide. But it's critical to demonstrate that with whatever that they've prioritized, there's been a shortfall of around 953 million, which they have submitted to the National Department of Transport for assistance, which as a result of the budget adjustment, will then submit that motivation of reprioritization as part of the unforeseeable and avoidable expenditures. The next slide is to really demonstrate the 730 project, which is the details of how many projects, what are the activities that are required in that particular spaces, including the issue around blacktop patching, your washaway repairs, how do we then do the structures repair, and obviously restatement of some of those gabions, which I've indicated them as part of the damage that has happened. Just at a high level, looking at progress to date, starting with those interventions that we have done as the department, and the Honorable Deputy Minister has touched amongst those issues. In the spirit of coordination, we have really had engagement at a ministerial level led by Honorable Minister Mbalula with various MECs and other ministers within the government cluster to make sure that there's site inspection and how do we then coordinate together to be able to assist the province of KZN. And we had intervention, like I said, where we have waived the toll fees on the N2. And what we have done, which is very critical, as a coordination structure to be able to look at our effort, we have established what we call the Rapid Response Task Team, which is chaired by the Director General of the Department of Transport. And key, or the members of that RTT is Sanral CEO and Process CEO. We have the HOD of KZN province, the Department of Transport, and we have the eThekwini Transport Authority being part of that task team. And the task team was meeting every Monday since after the flood to be able to really look at the progress and deal with these particular issues. And the work of the task team really led the engagement with the National Disaster Management Center, engagement with National Treasury on the considering of the funding proposal, and we were able to get some approvals in that particular regard. And in this particular program, Sanral, based on the capacity they have, they've been appointed as the lead agents, which then included them assisting with where they've seconded the provincial team to deal with assessment in all provinces. And in other instances, they are working with the road authorities to be able to deal with the implementation. With regard to the budget implementation issues, especially on the shortfalls that I've alluded to, we have made our submission and a financial proposal which has been supported by the NDMC, which we have submitted to the province. My apologies to National Treasury, so that we are able to assist our intervention in that regard. And the amount that are captured there includes really the 731 million, which is really for Sanral, for toll and non-toll portfolio, because they have to really move funds across the board. The 277 million, which is really about the loss of revenue along the N2, and the 88 million is really on the cost of road maintenance, which you know is one of the challenges. And across the province, we have submitted the 953 for KZN, the 800 million to assist the province of the Eastern Cape, and the 111 to assist the province of the Northwest Province with regard to the shortfall that they've done. Looking at the progress, these are the interventions that we have done in terms of the rail infrastructure, particularly with PRASA, in terms of where we had hit in terms of the disaster. We are glad to announce that in terms of the freight network, in that intervention, we have appointed rail network construction with RNC to deal with the issue around rail infrastructure recovery, and to then say on the Umlazi corridor, especially the track rehabilitation at Reunion and the embankment, that work has reached a practical completion in terms of safe movement of trains, and the electric traction service have already started in that particular regard since June, the 1st of June, which was between Durban and Merebank stations, and has since been extended between Durban and East Pingo station in July. On the KwaMashu corridor, we thought it was very critical that we started with the clearing of the debris and sand removal, which was done by the in-house teams. And when I go to the slide, which really showed the work that has happened, and after I'll be able to then demonstrate that to the honorable members. But we have since started to assist our commuters in that particular space where we are running the diesel services between KwaMashu and Dal Bridge, which was started on the 6th of June, when we are consistently dealing with the major repairs in terms of the components that enable us to be able to run our rail network. On the Ilovo Bridge, we have engaged both Central CSIR and our RNC to assist us in that regard. We have already now issued a letter of award to RNC so that they can assist us, because what we then analyzed, if we were to do it ourselves in a long process, was going to take more than a year, but with their process and available capacity, they'll be able to do it in a short space of time. And with regard to the diesel locomotive, we'll be extending that on the Tonga Dal Bridge, which is planned to commence on in this current month, around the 15th of August. On the budget-related matters, in the next slide, just to demonstrate the work packages that have been done by PRASA, is that based on our assessment, the amount is around 2.8 billion. It shows really what are the phases in terms of the work packages that we can do. But what we want to announce is that of the 2.89 billion, based on the funding proposals we have submitted to National Treasury, National Treasury has given approval that PRASA can reprioritize within the available budget so that they can start with the repairs in that particular element of work. In the next slides, it just shows our commitment that we have already done in terms of the flood repairs awarded to RNC, and that commitment is really around 315 million when we are in terms of phase one, and how do we make sure that the element works. Just looking at the slides, 18, I think around 18 to 20 honorable chairs, it really shows the before in terms of the damage that has happened, and the after, which was the really around the Greenwood Park line, how we're clearing the mud from the track. And the next slide, it really shows at Reunion Station what was the damages before in terms of the washaway and the track hanging and the signal and the work that as PRASA were able to do in that particular space. And in terms of the next slide, is that the Merebank Reunion, the work that has been able, so that we're able to then demonstrate the damage in that particular regard and the work that has happened. Moving to the next slide, it's demonstrate the work that will be that has happened in terms of Sanral work where we are leading, and key to then show the areas that were affected in terms of the N2. I think the message that we want to leave with the committee is that in terms of the funding allocated on the flood repairs in KZN and what Sanral will be spending is around 640 million, and to date around 45 million has been spent, especially for the emergency repairs and to allow work to be able, easy flow of traffic in that regard. In the next slide, we demonstrate progress in terms of what has happened to then say in terms of phase one, measures to make sure that traffic is accommodated, and we deal with temporary repairs that has been done in terms of around April in 2022 is 100%. It started around April 22 and then it's complete. Permanent repairs, obviously, to road infrastructure. It's a long process that will enable your flood damage assessment and all those. But at a high level, to just demonstrate, like we said, KZN had it, we had around 106 total failures, which around 8 of those were major, and then 98 of those were minor, and that's the work that we then had to do. And we thought it was critical that in the next slide, we then demonstrate between slide 23 and 26, really the work that has been done in terms of progress, really to that phase 1, where there were deviation and we had to really do some work to accommodate that. And slide 24 is really demonstrating the construction of the temporary bypass in the median, which was completed, and the N2 was open for traffic as part of the intervention around the 27th of May. And since that, there have been really no incident reported in that particular space. On the next slide is really demonstrating the repairs around the N2 section towards North Coast at Umhlanga River, in terms of the issue of the sinkhole that has occurred, and the failure was repaired and the traffic was opened around the 9th of June. We demonstrate the work. That's Sandra. Slide 26, Honorable Chair, it really talks about the repairs on the N3, that section around Key Ridge, to then show the sinkhole that was done and that was completely closed, and the sinkhole was inspected around the beginning of May, but we were able to really make sure that that is now is open, the road is open for traffic. The next slide, Chair, demonstrates the work that needs to be done, detail in terms of phase 2 of the project, which really includes a whole long-term view around the work that we need to do on the N2. And it really shows, one, the dashboards of those projects in terms of the location of where they are, what are the damage details in that particular regard, and obviously what is the estimated relation, the cost, where is the repair progress, which is what is then critical, that the majority of these are still at contractor procurement stage, because you had to then follow the key processes of really how do you then plan procurement to get to the next stage. And in terms of the estimated milestone, we're able to really provide the time frames there in terms of how we net forward. But there's one, the Umhlanga River Bridge there is a completion in terms of that regard. The next slide, just at a high level, unpacking the work that has happened, is to then say the work that Central has done to date. Flood damage verification process has been done in terms of all those elements, and then to then say Central has engaged or got into the memorandum of understanding to assist KZ DOT in terms of the implementation of the R101 and the M4 in terms of the work that has been done. And with regard to that, you'll see that there were, to make sure that the roads were safe in terms of progress to date, there were, in terms of temporary 5 of 16 failures are complete. In terms of your 3 to 16 are in progress, and obviously the permanent repairs, it will be work that will be able to deal with that. What then becomes the key element is that there is an element of budget reprioritization, even though we've already identified what needs to be implemented. Key is that the majority of some of the money will therefore obviously be released in terms of after the budget prioritization to enable that work to be finished within the regulatory framework. The next slide, just want to demonstrate to the committee members the kind of stages that we need to go through in terms of implementation, especially in terms of phase 2, where is the advertisement of construction tenders for permanent repairs on central network, and then how we then appoint the contractors, which is planned around September 2022, and obviously how do we then complete the permanent repairs moving forward. We have included a slide which really talks to the risk management issues which we have identified. One, I think, is very key,
as part of our governance process, so that in project of this particular magnitude, you then identify the risk. But at the same time, we are continuously engaging with Auditor General, AGSA, because they are doing a real-time audit as part of the work that we do. They attend some of our engagement at an RTT level, and obviously look at the report and the governance process that we are getting involved in terms of this process, which really talks to those, what then become the challenge, the risk, the corrective actions, and the deadline, and who's responsible in terms of dealing with those particular issues. Moving to the province of the Eastern Cape, in terms of implementation progress to date, as part of the work that we do at RTT, is that the department is implementing repairs of flood damage infrastructure amounting to 160 million. Obviously, utilizing the available resources, both as a combination of the outsourced teams and the in-house teams, and the work that they'll be doing will be carried in terms of this financial year and the next financial year. But it is critical to inform the community that there is that shortfall of 800 million, which we have demonstrated as part of the budget submission that we will be able to do. With regard to Northwest, the implementation to projects in terms of phase 2, these are the processes that they are going through in terms of majority of them, in terms of the region, in terms of the next 2 slides, being at the bid education level, and it really shows what are the number of projects in terms of those particular districts. Moving to the next slide, which is KZN, is really to demonstrate how many projects are there in KZN, which is around 524 around procurement stage, and those that are already for quality assurance at Provincial Treasury is around 102, and our debt projects are already at 9 of those. And moving into the next slide, honorable members, is really to demonstrate those activities that I've talked to and how they break down in terms of the numbers. And the next slides will be talking to the same project, but not going into detail in terms of the regions and the district municipalities, then say at what stage, what are the projects in that Pietermaritzburg region, for example, and how many are the projects, how many are at the procurement stage, and that goes to the next slide, which is the Ladysmith region. Majority of those are at vetting by Provincial Treasury, with the next slide will be vetting, and then we move to Durban region. It really demonstrates across the district municipalities, and then you go into Empangeni region, where there was already awards within 4 awards within King Ketwayo and Zululand. And then the next slide, next 2 slides, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, demonstrate the progress to date in terms of the belly bridges, which is the work that we are doing in together with the Department of Defense, and the work that we're doing with Public Works. And there are 23 bridges in KZN, and the process has already started. And the first slide really just demonstrate what is the site name in terms of that, and then the type of the bridge, where is it located in terms of the municipality, what is the estimated cost, and the planned start date in terms of those particular issues. In terms of the recommendation, Chair, before I even get to the recommendations, I think one of the elements that is becoming a challenge in the province in us doing their work, both on the Central side and on the Prada side, is the issue around business forums, which keeps on really delaying the work. I mean, we know, for example, the work with Sandra, with PRASA on the RNC, I think there's been delayed with 2 weeks now, so that we are able to really negotiate around those issues. And you find some that even come in that are not really adding value. So I think it's one element that, if it's not really managed properly across all spheres of government, it will really delay progress in terms of that particular regard. We are engaging both the province and the metro in terms of how do we really make the balancing act in that regard. And as part of the recommendation, honorable chairs, we want that committee to take note of the progress with regard to work done in terms of the progress, what needs to be done, so that we are able to then address the infrastructure challenges and the need that has been caused by the disaster in terms of the floods, one in KZN, but in other provinces that we have identified, being the Eastern Cape and Northwest. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Acting DG. It's clear that, Honorable DM, when you have a team that is in the house and they were privileged to the earlier engagement, that is why you are more focused and to the point in terms of what we're expecting as members. But be that as it may, it's a very detailed presentation that will come handy to assist us as we'll be getting to KZN before the end of the week. And of course, some of the issues are a true reflection of what we experienced when we're in KZN. I'll take this opportunity, give it to my co-chair to deal with the part of questions from the honorable members. Honorable co-chair.
Thank you, Honorable Nyambi. Are there any questions of clarity? Number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's start on the left-hand side.
No, thanks, Chairperson. The presentation was detailed. Honorable Khai. Young disturber.
Khai, please.
Yeah,
I remind you to introduce himself.
What the name is here?
No, introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Sam Sandambela. So, no, the presentation was detailed. I'm just a bit worried when it comes to Northwest. If we can perhaps get the same detail. You know, in the KZN report, presentation, it's clear. Umgeni road, where. But in KZN earlier on, you mentioned there's about 4 billion that needs to be spent on the roads. But there's no breakdown. We don't know what's happening in Northwest. Unlike KZN, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chairpersons. My name is Mandla Khai, member of the committee. I think my question is similar to that of Honorable Zandamela. With regard to KZN, you went into finer details, even have the municipal roads, their numbers, the regional roads, the national roads, N3, N2, and so forth. You even have pictures of the damages that took place in these roads and rail network. When I look at Eastern Cape, for example, there's just one slide that talks about 160 million. And there are no details in terms of which roads or which municipalities are affected. For example, when we were in the Eastern Cape, we went to Port St. John's, where they indicated that in their MIC, there's only 38 million. And in that 38 million, they're supposed to do everything that's got to do with infrastructure grants, not just roads, but everything. In fact, they had to even take some of their equitable share to supplement the MIG that has been given to them. So I think it's a problem. I would like to suggest, Co-Chairperson, that we need to get another report that is specific with regard to the Eastern Cape and the Northwest, and with regard to the damages, areas that have been damaged by the floods, and also the costs related to, in fact, the progress with regard to reconstructing those damaged roads, if there are any rail networks that have also been damaged. The next question would be on the application for funding to the Treasury, if there's any update with regard to that. There's update, I think, with regard to Sanral, if I'm not mistaken, but I didn't hear any update with regard to PRASA. On the bridges, also with regard to the bridges, especially the rural bridges, there are details with regard to KZN in terms of including foot bridges and vehicular bridges. If we can also get that kind of a report for the other two provinces as well. Thank you very much, Chair.
Next is the Honorable Bibi. Was you number 3?
I think I was number 3.
Yes, I think you
mentioned
can
yes.
continue.
Thank you very much, Honorable Co-Chair and Honorable Chair Floric. I am Mainale Soma, member of the committee from National Assembly. Chair, having listened to social development presentation, I'll start with that question. But also as a person from KZN in Durban in particular, the Yellowwood Park Transnet building where they have evicted displaced people from as a shelter, if you can take and pay attention what happened to those people, because we are all equally worried about them, that will get street adults that will include even the kids. That's one, Chair. Chair, in welcoming the presentation, at least there are details, notwithstanding that other provinces there are no details. Firstly, I would like to say, can you pay attention where do you dump the rubbles, so that when rains comes back, we don't have a problem of flooding, because I've observed in particular PMB area, Pietermaritzburg area, Durban and North Coast areas, there has been clearance in terms of the damage so that they can be repaired, those roads and bridges in particular. That falls under national government. And the rubbles is on the roadside, and that's a challenge for me. And I think there's a more discussion that needs to take place between municipality and your good selves. Two, in terms directly to the department, is the roads that you have specified, do they include gravel roads? In particular, those ones falls under national government. Secondly, on the sub-question to that is, are there any discussions with the provincial government and municipality? Because as a layman person, would not necessarily differentiate whether it's an R or it's an N or it's a P road and all those things. The road is a road. The last one for now, Chair, I'm sure you have used a technical tool to separate the roads that were damaged because of non-maintenance, as it were, and the roads that were seriously damaged by the road. If you have done that, are you still going to launch the potholes, closing of potholes? But I'm raising it because those other things, that potholes and the likes, are more maintenance issues. But in terms of related with floods, what will be your approach on those ones? Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. I see there was almost a violent opposition to being called number 4 again, so I've moved forward to that side. Don't worry, we haven't started with the list processes yet. That will come after conference. You may continue.
No, thank you very much to co-chairs. And also thank you very much, DM, and also with the officials with the detailed report, of which you could see that they've done quite a number of work. Mine one, Chair, will be, UPRASA have provided funding for Peway signal, electrical, etc., to the amount of approximately 2 billion. Now, does PRASA usually have contingency funds to be used when confronted with damages to the roads? And again, Chair, I would like to know also, Usandral too has provided funding as part of their assistance. And also, could the Department of Could the department provide further information on whether the entities had to prioritize funds from other projects to use allocation for disasters? If this is the case, what other already planned projects by PRASA and SANRAL will be affected? Another thing, Chair, with the department, we know that there are several sections of roads and railways, especially in Mlaza and Wamashu. It's a pity, I'm from KZN. And also South Coast. What is the current rate of rebuilding roads and rails network? As you know, people are very desperate. They use this, means for the transportations, and that's the only survival way of using it when they go to work. And then what other options are available to people wishing to go to work in that regard? And also, how is the department chairperson will be assisting those people? With the last one, chairperson, has the department made sort of proposals to National Treasury for environments to assist with these flood disasters? And also, if so, how much? And was this made on behalf of UPRASA and on SANRAL? We just need that clarity. And also, in respect of Eastern Cape, I've heard that you haven't dwelled that much the report of the Eastern Cape. Just want to know, we know that Eastern Cape, is the money only now being dispersed to remediate roads that happened December and January 2022, as presented in your presentation on page 8. Again, on page 8, the estimated cost roads for repairs is 1.3 billion. Is this amount inclusive in addressing previous damages that occurred in December and January 22? Thank you very much, Chairpersons. Those were my questions.
Thank you. The Honourable Manku.
Thank you, Chair. Lisa Mangu again. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, DM and the acting DG. I'll go straight to your summary of interventions by the department, because my colleagues have covered the other areas. Second last bullet, you say all projects have been completed and details captured on the SANRAL mobile app. I think my comment there is that we don't have access to that app, and it makes it difficult to be able to assess that. So maybe we need to find a better way as we respond to what my colleagues Zamdela there and Khai were saying regarding the two provinces, to get those specific details. The second issue there specifically linked to that is that R61 in the Eastern Cape, at the entrance to Port St. John's, we know that there was emergency response done immediately after the floods, but the work was not completed, DM, and the municipality was told by SANRAL in that area that they will only be considered in phase 2, which is a recipe for disaster. Because should any flood hit again, Port St. John's will be flooded again at the entrance to Port St. John's. So specifically, the request is that can we have an intervention there so that we don't have a repeat of that. When we go to your budget-related matters, progress to date, which I think is slide number 15 of 44, you list a couple of monies there, and I'm not sure, it might be very pedantic, but I don't know why you are including VAT there. Why are you saying figures including VAT? Maybe that, and others you don't include VAT. I'm not sure why. You include VAT on 2, but below you don't include VAT. Maybe there is a significance to that. But of interest is the second last bullet, 800 million for Eastern Cape. My assumption here is that we are only talking to your capital budget, which would be going to SANRAL, but you are not including what would be required by the province for their gravel or rural roads. This is very important because the picture that is coming out here, at least from what I'm seeing, is that there's been more concentration on the major roads or the roads for those people who have. But the have-nots in the rural areas seem to have been pushed to the back. And I use the word guardedly, seem to be pushed to the back. Now, when we were in the Eastern Cape had specifically said they had requested to the department an amount of roughly 950 million on their PRMG, I think to be advanced. But we had noted, because we had had privy information, some of us, that the province in the previous financial year had relinquished about 850 million of the PRMG. Now, there is little being said on this presentation about the provincial roads maintenance grant, of how you are using it to respond to the plight of the people of the Eastern Cape on rural roads, or even the KZN and Northwest. So I would like to have some information specifically as it relates to the response to the rural gravel roads, because it doesn't appear here. Most of it is your major roads, which are in those areas which are affording or are able to afford. Now, if we look at PRASA, it's a comment. You say that Ilovo Bridge, there is where you talk about Ilovo Bridge, and that is particularly on slide number 16. You say PRASA has issued a letter of award to commence with structural assessments, geotech, and hydrology investigations. And this is more than 4 months after the disaster. I think this has not been treated like a disaster. 4 months later, we are saying we are still issuing an award for assessment. We are not even there. I think it's a worrying presentation there, and we hope that something could be done that could make it much better to those people. Remember, DM, that the people who use PRASA trains are the people who don't have. We've seen an increase of fuel prices. The taxi industry, or the public transport generally, has increased their prices, and these people cannot have access to trains, which are still the most reasonable. Now, my second last, if not last, would be on SANRAL presentation, implementation progress to date, slide number 29. You detail the flood damage verification process by SANRAL, completed 100%, beautiful, with KZN there, and the eThekwini municipality, and again, we don't tell us, as the colleagues have said, what has happened in the other 2 provinces. But of major interest is number 3, funding. Budget reprioritization, it says confirmation of funding by DOT is still to be confirmed. It says status still pending. And again, DM, 4 months later, 4 months later, we are still to confirm reprioritization. We are not talking new money here. And I think it's a matter of concern, which one would really like to appeal to you that something has to change in that area. Chairperson, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Number 6.
Thanks, Chair. I know that we might have been late. Our condolences to you. We know that you went through difficult times at some point. Our condolences must be appreciated. I want to ask, starting from the PRASA point of view, I know for a fact that the railway lines where Metro Rail, which is PRASA today, are operating does not belong to them. And this is because I know for a fact that I worked for Transnet for nearly 32 years. I know the fact that it is not necessarily owned by them. So if there is a damage, the damage might be then given to the old Sportnet, which is TFR today. What is it? What is then the delay? And I know that there is a lot of bottlenecks in the work that Transnet or TFR would want to do through its subsidiaries, which is one of them being your PRASA, which is today, which was Metro Rail by then. Is it not part of the delays that you are having of wanting to work the TFR line using the PRASA entity as obviously they will want to access the resources that gives credence to their operations. And I know that in your work is not only your PRASA that you are dealing with, there is railway lines, for instance, in Durban, that go through Middelhof and to the harbors, to and from the harbor through Middelhof route, railway lines, and which are not necessarily part of the Metro Rail, it is the TFR part of it. So I don't know how the relationship that you normally will have as a difficulty of Maluleke that might want to explain the difficulties there, and what is it that you need as intervention, if there is any, for it to be speedily dealt with. Now, the issue of the business forums, I'm sure Minister Mbalula has raised this point even way before the floods are concerned, and we know all of us that there is this group of people that are demanding 30% of work to be done. And it is still being used today as a hindrance. Is there no plan that 6-1, because in his pronouncement most of the time, Minister Mbalula, is that there's a criminal element that it needs to be dealt with like that, and it should be dealt with like that. When we went to KZN on your roads, alongside the beachfront, there were a lot of rubbles and the roads were damaged and all those other things. In the pictures that you're showing us, you don't speak to those. And we were sometimes warned, Chairperson, you remember that, no, you come here because Kunimali, Emlazani, and so forth and so on. What is the status quo of those difficulties that we had? The toll gates, it might be toll gate in Gauteng because we want to do away with them. But the ones in your Moy River and others and others, when they are damaged, maybe during these floods, how are they being treated in as far as because they are an entity on their own? But I must say, Chair, Minister, besides the Northern Cape and the Northwest and the Eastern Cape that we are not specific on them, Of course, Chairperson, we must complain. Pumalanga is not mentioned here. They are mentioning all other provinces, so Northern Cape and KZN. Ours are not mentioned. So. But besides the two, which is part of ourselves, there is progress that we must say, roads, that transport, that we are happy that there is actually tangible progress you are showing. The work, as it was and as is today is progress, and we must appreciate that particular point. Thanks, Chair.
Now I know why they say don't judge a book by its cover. I thought you have just graduated from the youth sector, but you said you work for PRASA for 32 years. Then I'm speechless in terms of your actual age. Honorable Kikaba.
And he is a former MMC somewhere. But thank you very much, Chair. Mine are just few, and I think probably first we need to commend the swift intervention that was done. But I don't know whether should I say by the National Department or by the Provincial Department, because you remember when we met with the Premier in KZN, they were reopening I think it's N2. They were just reopening the road there. And when he spoke to us, he said that they have not received any money from the national coffers. But nonetheless, in the presentation here now, we get a sense that the National Department has also intervened. What is important is that people are able to move from one point to the other. I think for now we need just to be glad that that is happening. But my interest, Chair, is on phase 1. How was the money spent? And I'm interested in knowing, because of the presentation is giving an idea that all of us, we know that it was something that was not expected. Did they follow the tender processes? Or how did it happen? Because it looked like in phase 2, then there are processes in place of tender processes and how the monies will be spent in phase 2. And also in phase 1, there are issues of deviations that the acting Director General has raised here, that there were deviations that they needed to deal with as the department. And if we can also be just briefed on what specific were those deviations, in what areas of the province, and how did that affect the budget? That is all from myself, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Kikaba. The next is Honorable Prudence on the virtual platform.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I have 3 inquiries. The first one is, Chair, you will remember that we all visited a road called the MR551. That was the road that goes to Shongweni. We first encountered some residents who had fixed the road themselves, and I can tell you they have successfully completed that road. We met them where it was half done. You can remember the one gentleman was quite angry that no assistance had come from government. The second area along that road was where there was a massive washaway down into a very deep valley. And then finally, Chair, you remember we ended our visit there right at the bottom at a bridge, a concrete bridge, where there'd been a washaway of the one end, completely and utterly cutting off the entire area of Mpumalanga. And I'm talking about Mpumalanga, the town, not the province. Now, Chair, I don't see the MR 551 anywhere on this DOT report. So it makes me wonder why it's not on there, why no work has been done, because I can assure you, having spoken to a resident this morning, that no work has been done, especially on that bridge right at the bottom. Does it fall into a provincial report? And does that mean that DOT are just reporting, are they giving us a complete picture, or are they just giving us a national picture? So the question about the MR 551, it is a major link. And I think you remember that when we spoke to residents there, they advised that to travel the long way around costs people an extra 40 Rand in the taxis. And that is completely and utterly untenable. The second issue I want to get to is the N2 at Ungababa. And then also the N2 at Adams Road that appear on page 28 in the report. Chair, in the interim, I've written to the CEO of SANRAL and I've asked him for a timeline relating to those two sections of road. The CEO of SANRAL came out, responded in particular in relation to the section near Adams Road, which is in the Mountain Torti, that the work would commence in July last month. Now I see, to my dismay, that the work will only commence at the end of September, the 28th of September to be exact. So my question is why has that work not started in July as per the undertaking of the CEO of SANRAL? It's a major problem, Chair, because in those two areas, Ungababa and Amanzimtoti, there is massive, massive traffic snarl-ups. Traffic every day goes back 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 kilometers as a result of the narrowing of the road there. The department is right that you can pass there, you can drive past there, but because of the narrowing of the road, it causes massive traffic snarl-ups. And so it's part of my constituency. I speak for my constituents, and I would like to know from SANRAL why, when they promised July, work will only start at the end of September, which, as one of my colleagues pointed out, is far too many months. That's now close to 6 months, Chair. 6 months since the floods. That work will only start on repairing what is actually quite a minor job on that road. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The next is Honorable Detroit on a virtual platform. Honorable Detroit.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I've been partially covered by the previous speakers. My concern is also the Northwest Province. I mean, in the slides, it's quite clear. KZN road damage 5.7 billion, Northwest 4 billion. Although Northwest didn't have nearly as much rain as KZN. My feeling is that this is historical damage and lack of maintenance that contributed to the current state of the roads in the province. It's obvious and evident that we want the roads to be repaired. So I'm also looking forward to receiving that detailed report. We're aware of one bridge that was swept away as a result of rains, but that bridge was visited during our provincial week earlier in this year. And I want to know if the department can perhaps provide us with an average standard cost of resurfacing roads in the different types of roads, as well as the rebuilding of roads in the different types of roads. But give it to us in a price per square meter, because the width of the roads, they're not the same. And I think it will definitely assist all members to scrutinize the figures that's provided to us, not only on this platform and with regards to this current situation of the floods, but when we do our oversight visits in the different provinces, to also refer to that figure and see what it comes to. So if we can maybe have that detailed report on the cost as well as on the roads that's actually damaged. Thank you, Chair. That's all from me.
Thank you, Honorable Detroit. Acting DG and your team, the Honorable DM will just come at the end. I'll allow you, and you can work with your team as and when you feel you want to have them to come in and assist. Acting DG.
Thanks, Chair. I'll allow my colleagues to come in to just deal with few issues, especially the central issues that have been raised on the KZN issues that has been raised by members here. And I'll allow Mr. Dumisani Kavinde to deal with those, especially some of the roads that have been mentioned because he's in charge of KZN. Then I'll allow the CEO of PRASA and Tate Isha Memran to deal with the PRASA issues. And then I'll come in with PRASA and then Tate Maluka we finish. Can we start with you, sir?
Mr. Nkabinde.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Chair. Okay, and I must come closer. Chair, I tried to write down the questions, but it's quite. I've completed 2 pages or 2 booklets already, trying to capture everything. I'll just go through, if you don't mind. I'll just scan through and see which one is relevant that I can deal with. Okay, on. You only deal with what is relevant. Definitely. Yes. Okay. Not the 2 pages. No, I'm not going to deal with the entire 2 pages. Okay, I think there was a question regarding the funding from National Treasury, and I think also that question of funding also arose from other honourable members. I think the first one that I will deal with is for Sandral, the funding requirements. I think there was also a question about reprioritization, that for the national roads or the freeways where there were failures, the reprioritization actually happened, and the way that we have dealt with the reprioritization is that we will look at how we budget for our projects. We have projects that we call them under OPEX or operations, that are projects that need to run 24 hours a day. Those projects include like toll operation projects, and we also have projects like we call them routine road maintenance projects, where we say to the public, for all the freeways, we have a contractor that is looking after a freeway 24 hours a day, so that they can fix any cutting grass, patching potholes, and so forth. So, and then we have the other stream for capital projects. So what we have done, we looked at the capital projects, which, for instance, if I make an example, that there is a freeway that needs to be upgraded somewhere in Northwest, 5 kilometers to be upgraded, that is the upgrade is based on the traffic volume. So that was planned to be happening in the current year or next financial year. So we will look at that particular project, whereby we say, if we take the budget that is already allocated for that upgrade and delay the implementation by 1 year, then it doesn't actually affect the operations on the ground. So that's how we looked at the reprioritization to fund the project within Sandral. Second to that, Sandral also insures all their infrastructure. So all the freeways in South Africa is insured or are insured. So when the floods actually happened, then we lodged a claim against the insurers so that we can actually get the money from the insurance to repair the fund, to repair the roads. But on that front, in terms of how the money is paid, we have to actually use our own budget and put a final claim right at the end, and only then we get paid. So there is a financing that we will get from the reprioritization with the aim to replenish it from claiming from the insurance. We have done the claims a couple of times in the past, and it has worked very well. So that is just the national roads only. Other roads authorities, I don't think they do this particular insurance. So I think that we'll sort out the question regarding reprioritization and the funding of the freeways, or the repairs on the freeways. And then looking at, okay, I think Honorable Lesoma stated that we must be careful in terms of the rubble that is dumped on the roadside. I think on that, I will take note of that, but obviously the contractors that we have on the ground, there is a clear environmental management plan on how to handle the rubble that is coming out from the construction and must be actually be dumped on a registered landfill site. That there is a requirement to actually present to the person or the engineer that is doing the administration of the contract, that he must present the slips from the landfill that states that this is where I dumped all the rubble. So that's how we deal with it. So I think it's temporarily there, but definitely there is a mechanism to deal with that. And then I think the gravel roads, when you're looking at the presentation regarding specifically in KwaZulu-Natal, from the provincial government, some of the budget that is allocated there clearly indicates, I think there was a figure of around 2 billion or so that was when DG showed that there is, I'm trying to see if I can find that slide, I think where he was showing the progress to date, the slide that had 2.9 billion, I think there, from that 2.9 billion that the provincial government is planning to spend, there is, I think, projects that is a number of 593 projects at a total of 2.4 billion. That money is for regraveling, so it's for dealing with the gravel roads. So indeed, the lion's share of the 2.9 billion is actually going to those rural roads or the gravel roads. So I want to confirm that. And then the other question was regarding that have we been able to separate between maintenance and the flood-related damages. I think on one of the slides, it was indicated that the budget has actually shifted a bit from the original high value to a reduced value. So that came about as part of the assessment that the team that Sanral sent to the ground to do the verification, because the provincial team and the municipal team, they did the initial assessment, but the verification was done by the Sanral team afterwards. And the aim for that verification was to actually verify what they've submitted as the assessment. And part of that verification indicated that the team will confirm that actually this particular project that we have registered as flood-related, based on our knowledge and our expertise, is actually due to maintenance. And those were stricken off the roll, and only the projects that were related to floods remained on the list, and the budgets were adjusted accordingly. I'm looking at Honorable, I don't know if I call it correct, BB or Bebe. BB. Mama. Okay, I'm just looking at your comments, Mama. Okay, I think your first comment about the funding, so I think I've covered you on that one. And then the prioritization is also covered. And then I must mention that I think you've mentioned also the South Coast, Mlazi, and them, that the current rate of rebuilding. I think a lot of work that Sandral undertook around Mlazi, you will remember that it was not accessible. So on the section of the freeway or N2, where the intersection that goes to Mlazi, there was a lot of sand and a lot of I don't know how many trucks we pulled out there of sand that we were trying to make sure that the road is eventually opened. But further down, we are acutely aware. I think also the comment regarding, I think it was Honorable Dutoit, that further south there are those failures on the N2 that are taking long. And the focus there on the highway is that we, together with the provincial DOT, we looked at R102, which is the provincial road, which is actually in a very bad state. In our discussion, we said we'll try and make sure that we prioritize that we open at least even one lane. And I think those are the deviations that I think Honorable Kikaba asked about, that what deviations have we applied for and so forth. So based on the contracts that Sandral have, more typically I mentioned the routine road maintenance that are 3-year and 5-year contracts that we have that operates on our road 24 hours a day. Within those contracts, there are funds that are put aside for emergencies, because indeed on any other normal routine work that we do on the highways, there is a need now and then to do emergency work. So we have utilized the funding that we have kept on those 3-year, 5-year contracts to actually reprioritize and say this is indeed falling under emergency, but it's flood related. So then we just redirected those funds on the contracts that are on the ground to deal with the minor works, or phase one, that as we call it, that was meant to make safe and to actually open up the road so that the traffic can flow. So that's where we have actually utilized the funds to actually do some clearing, and that we found that it was helping us to have such contracts, because that didn't needed to go to any procurement. Those contracts that are there, that we are making sure we always renew every time the 3 or 5 year comes to an end, we renew. So it actually worked in our favor. Otherwise, I think we would have been in a very difficult situation that everything is falling under procurement, and I think the country would have been in a serious state of disaster if we didn't have those contracts in place.
Mr. Nkabinde, some of your things will do the engagement when we are with you on the ground in 2 weeks' time. We are definitely going to KZN, but let me allow you to round off.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It will be...
Kavinde, just focus on the app issue that was asked by Honorable Manu, and why are we not moving on the Umka Baba Amzondoti, that N2 in terms of the time frame, and the M551. Those three, I think you'll have wrapped up.
All right. Thank you, DG. The Sunral app, I think I must just mention that it is actually available to anyone. You just need to register and undertake some training on it. Then you can actually access the information. Sunral, this particular app, the aim and what is actually ongoing now is that there was a road maintenance indaba that was held in Gauteng sometimes earlier this year before the floods, where a decision was taken that Sunral must assist all provinces with the know-how in the handling of the data and so forth. So this particular app is actually part and parcel of that resolution, whereby we invited all the provinces that will give them training, their staff or any public member, to actually being able to access that particular information. So I think the information is available, can be accessible, but you obviously need to register and undertake some training on how to access the information. And then you asked about that I must deal with the two projects, Kababa and them in the south. And I think, unfortunately, I think the one that is more dire is the Mansimtoti one, because the Kababa, if we can just talk about that one, that there was a total closure of the highway. Then we prioritized by building just one lane as a detour to make sure that the freeway is still free-flowing at Mkababa. However, at Manzimtoti, there, I think in terms of prioritizing where there was a dire need, we actually left it because there was still some accessibility that is available opposed to other areas. And in terms of the July versus the September, it is just the stringent procurement requirement that we have to undertake. And I think from Auditor General, National Treasury, they are doing a lot in terms of assisting that we do the correct things and we don't end up with